The chamber was built for this. I had walked past its doors my whole life and never been allowed inside. Tonight, the doors were open for me. Tonight, I stood on the center stone, and the family arrayed itself in a half circle around the walls, and the lantern above me cut my shadow short under my own feet. I was the youngest son of the Cross family. The Cross family was an assassin clan. The clan measured its children by a single number, and that number was supposed to rise. Mine had never moved. Level 1. The system that ranked every soul in this world had looked at me once and decided it had never looked again. Years of training, years of hunger and bruise, and the polished discipline my father drilled into me before I could read. None of it mattered. The number stayed where it started. So tonight, the family had brought me here to be erased. My father stood at the far edge of the stone with the family book open in his hands. Marcus Cross, patriarch. He read the formal lines without looking at me, the lines that ended a name. He spoke them slowly and clearly, the way a man speaks when he wants no one to misremember what he did. The witnesses against the walls did not move. They had been waiting for these lines since before I was born. My mother stood at his shoulder, Helen Cross. She did not read. She said only one thing when Marcus paused between lines, and she said it quietly enough that only the front row heard. She said she was ashamed she had carried me. Then she closed her mouth and did not open it again. I heard her clearly. The chamber was made for sound to travel. There are children who would have cried. There are children who would have begged. I had counted the people in the chamber on my way in, and I had counted again from the center stone, and I had decided sometime around the third count that I was not going to give them either thing. They could erase my name. They could not erase the way I had looked at them while they did it. My father's voice carried through the next line, the one that severed the bloodline at its lowest branch. He read it the way another father might read a grocery list, flat, finished, already moving on to the next item. He did not look up. I felt my own breath go shallow and steady. My hands hung open at my sides. My feet were exactly inside the inner circle painted on the floor because I had stepped into it carefully and I was not going to step out. I waited. The lantern overhead flickered once, and then a voice that was not in the chamber spoke inside my head. It was not my father. It was not my mother. It was not any witness. It was something quieter and very far away, and it spoke with a precision that did not belong to a person. It asked me a question. It used my name, the name the family was at that exact second erasing, and it asked if I wanted to die here, on this stone, the way they had decided, or if I wanted to step through a door that no one else in this room could see. It called itself the gate. It told me, not in those words, but in something underneath words, that the door it was offering opened into 100 million years of solitude, that nothing on the other side would be kind, that I would train alone, that I would suffer, that when I came back, less than a second would have passed in this room. It did not promise that I would win anything. It did not promise that I would matter. It offered me the chance, and it asked me, in a voice my parents could not hear, what I wanted to do with the breath I still had. I did not look at my father. I did not look at my mother. I looked at the lantern over my head, and I thought about the count I had done on the way in. I thought about every face in the half circle along the walls. I thought about how easily they had agreed to this, every one of them, and how quickly they would forget my name the moment Marcus finished reading it out of the book. I had one breath of pride left. I used it to say yes. My father raised his hand to read the final line, the line that put the period at the end of my existence in the family ledger. Helen's mouth opened in the same instant. Halfway through some small encouragement to him, neither of them got to finish. The chamber went away. There was no floor when I arrived. There was no air. There was no sound. There was a gray that did not end, and a light that came from nowhere, and a sense of room without any walls to make the room. I stood in the middle of it with my hands still open at my sides and my feet still planted as if the painted circle were beneath me. Nothing happened for a long time. Then the gate began. The first year I did not understand what was being asked of me. The gate generated a small stone room. The gate generated a sword. The gate generated against the far wall a thing shaped like a man. The thing attacked me. I lost. The thing waited. I tried again. I lost. The thing waited. I tried again. The gate did not get tired. The gate did not get bored. The gate was a patient teacher that did not care whether the student lived. The first decade, I learned to hold a weapon. The first century, I learned to read the books. The gate left on tables that had not been there an hour earlier. The first millennium, I learned that the books did not lie, and that the forms in them, practiced for long enough, did the things the books had said they would do. By year 10,000, I had stopped counting in years. The gate gave me what I needed when I needed it. Libraries appeared. Sparring forms appeared. Schools of swordsmanship I had never heard of. Taught by ghosts, the gate built for the lesson and dissolved when the lesson was done. I learned the grim arts in pieces. The slow first, the patient breath, the cold root that anchored every motion. I learned the War King's sword wings the same way, one wing at a time, then both moving without being told. I learned magic that had no name on the other side of the door. I learned magic that had names but no schools. I learned everything. I broke somewhere in the middle. It happened slowly, the way old wood goes soft before it cracks. I had been alone for so long that the sound of my own breathing had stopped feeling like company. I had stopped expecting an answer to anything. I had stopped expecting weather. I sat down inside the gate at some point I could not have named, and I stayed sitting for a stretch of time that did not have a number, and the parts of me that had been waiting for someone to come back for me finally understood that no one was coming. I went mad for a while. I will not anatomize it. I laughed at nothing. I forgot my own face. There was one occasion, only one, when I knelt over and was sick on the empty ground, and the ground absorbed it without comment, and I lay there afterward and looked at the gray and waited to feel something. I waited for a long time. I rebuilt. I am not entirely sure how. I think it began with the memory of one person. There had been a girl once, before any of this, a princess imprisoned somewhere I had never been allowed to go. I had met her exactly one time when I was small and lost, and she had been cruel to me in a way that, looking back from the inside of the gate, with too much time to look, turned out to have been the only kindness anyone in this world had ever shown me. I did not understand it yet. I had not unpacked it, but she was the one thing the gate could not dissolve. Her face was the fixed point. When I rebuilt around her. After that, I trained again. I trained for a stretch of time I cannot honestly call by any number. I learned to be funny, so I did not have to be sad, because somewhere around the 700,000th year, I noticed that a joke could carry weight a tear could not. The jokes were thin at first, coping shaped like comedy. They got better with practice. By the time I had been inside the gate for what would have been the lifetime of a small civilization, I had a voice that did not match my face. The voice of someone who had lived a long time and had decided, very deliberately, not to take any of it seriously. I kept going. The gate kept teaching. Toward the end, I could feel the door behind me. I had not been able to feel it for most of the time I was inside. It was there, as steady as the lantern over the center stone in the chamber I had left 100 million years ago and a fraction of a second ago, depending on which side of the door you stood on. I turned when it was time. I walked back. I did not look at the gray on my way out. I had looked at it enough. The chamber came back exactly the way I had left it. The lantern was still flickering. The witnesses against the walls had not moved. My father's hand was still rising toward the final line. My mother's mouth was still half open around whatever small encouragement she had been about to add to him. Less than a second had passed. I stood on the center stone in the same body I had stepped onto it in. Late teens, slim, unremarkable. My hands hung open at my sides. My feet were exactly inside the painted circle. Inside the body, nothing was the same. I could feel the room the way a man feels a room he has rehearsed for too long. I could hear every breath in the half circle along the walls. I could hear the small dry sound of the page my father was about to turn in the family book. I could see the lantern above me, and I could see how it had been made. And I could see, somewhere underneath that, the rule of light that allowed it to be a lantern at all. The number above my head, if anyone in the chamber could have read it, had not moved. Level 1. Still, the system that had decided what I was before the gate ever opened had not changed its mind. It would not. I had 100 million years of confirmation on this point. The label was permanent. The label was a lie. I had stopped sometime around the second million years, expecting the label to matter. Everything else about me had moved. I will not list the numbers. The numbers were obscene. The titles were a small library on their own, and they had stopped being interesting to me before I had ever needed any of them. The list of things I could do filled the part of my mind that used to store fear and had nothing better to do with the space. My father did not know any of this. My father was reading the final line. I let him finish. I let my mother finish her own small encouragement because she had earned the dignity of finishing one sentence in her life, even if she had used it on this. The book closed. The lantern above me steadied. The witnesses against the walls exhaled, exactly together, the way a chorus exhales when the last note lands. I lifted my eyes. I looked at my father for the first time since I had walked into the chamber. I looked at my mother for the second. I did not smile. I did not say anything. I stood on the center stone in the boy they had erased, and I let them see, just for a moment, the boy they were about to learn they had erased. My father's expression did not change. He had not yet noticed. That was fine. He had the rest of his life to notice. Marcus moved first. His hand came down toward my throat in a straight line, the terminal gesture of the ritual, the one that put the body on the floor after the name left the book. He had rehearsed this motion. I could tell because his wrist was angled exactly where the family manual said to angle it, the way a student angles a practice sword at a straw dummy. I caught the gesture with one finger, my index finger, placed between his wrist and the line of my own throat, the way you place a bookmark between two pages. Nothing moved. His hand stopped. His arm stopped. His body stopped. The witnesses against the walls stopped. The lantern kept flickering because the lantern did not care. I held the finger there for 3 seconds, not because I needed to, because I wanted every pair of eyes in the chamber to absorb what they were looking at. A late teens boy, level 1 on every chart the family had ever built, holding the patriarch's full killing extension, still with one finger and looking bored. Then I let go. Marcus's arm dropped to his side, like someone had cut the string holding it up. His breath came in short. His eyes were still on the finger. I told him, not loudly, not kindly, that perfect aura control does something to a body the family code never accounted for. That when you spend 100 million years learning what aura actually is, the difference between level 1 and level everything disappears. The level stays. The ceiling vanishes. He heard me. I watched his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and a third expression that looked like the first second of grief before the brain shuts it down. My mother tried next. Helen stepped forward with her chin lifted and her voice set to the register she used when she wanted to sound like a woman who had authority over a situation that had already left her behind. She said she had raised me. She said this was a misunderstanding. She said the ritual was a formality, that the family had always intended to bring me back once I had proven myself, that she, personally, had argued against Marcus in private, that the erasure was never supposed to be permanent. I looked at her the way you look at a stain on a wall you have stopped trying to clean. You said you were ashamed you carried me. The words came out flat. That was 4 seconds ago. Your memory works. Mine does too. She flinched. Not much. Enough. Marcus reached behind his back, and I felt the small familiar tug of subspace storage opening. The sword that came out was the one the family kept for execution-grade missions. Single edge, aura conductive, heavy enough to split a training pillar from crown to base. He swung it at me with everything he had left in his code. I stopped the blade with one fingertip. My finger landed on the flat of the sword about a handspan from the hilt, and I pressed aura into the contact point, the way you press your thumb into a crack in glass. The blade held for a moment, then it did not. The metal split from the contact point outward, both halves ringing on the stone floor like dropped coins. Nobody in the chamber said anything. The witnesses along the walls had the frozen posture of people who had just witnessed something that fell outside the code's operating manual and were not sure whether to run, kneel, or pretend they had not seen it. Marcus did not stop. I will give him this. The man committed. He could not process what his eyes were showing him, so he defaulted to the only script the code gave him: escalation. He gathered every thread of magic the family line had bred into him across 3 generations and threw it at me in a single burst. The kind of ranked barrage the Cross family reserved for targets they never intended to leave alive. I deflected it with a circular motion of my open hand, the way you redirect water from a hose by cupping your palm, and used the momentum to put him on the floor. One motion, no blade, no blood, no sound except the impact of his back against the stone and the sharp exhale that left his lungs when he landed. He lay on the chamber floor, looking up at the lantern the way a man looks at a ceiling he has never noticed before. Helen screamed something I did not bother to parse and attacked with lightning. Rank 9. In the hierarchy the family worshipped, rank 9 was elite. Rank 9 was the ceiling most warriors in the world would never reach. Rank 9 said you had earned the right to stand in any room in the Empire and be taken seriously. The bolt came at me white and forked and carrying the kind of conviction that comes from a woman who has spent her whole life inside a system that told her rank 9 was enough. I answered with rank 25. My lightning was not white. It was not forked. It was a single clean column of violet that filled the space between us for one breath and then vanished. The tier the world believed only the strongest 5 beings alive could reach, thrown casually, the way you toss a coin onto a counter. Helen's bolt dissolved before it reached me. Mine kept going. It did not wound her. I had not aimed it to wound. It landed against her body the way a wall of sound lands against a person standing too close to a bell tower. Full body, instantaneous, a thing you felt in your skeleton before your mind caught up to what had happened. She dropped to her knees. Not because I had broken anything inside her, because the hierarchy she had lived inside her entire life had just demonstrated in front of her that it went 25 tiers higher than the ceiling she had been told was the top. The system she had trusted to rank her son as worthless went further than she had ever imagined. And the boy, the system called level 1, had just used the unreachable tier to tap her on the shoulder. The witnesses along the walls took a single collective step backward. Nobody ran. Nobody spoke. Marcus was still on the floor. Helen was on her knees beside him. Both of them were staring at me with an expression I had seen before in the gate, on the faces of things I had fought for eons. It was the expression of something that had just realized it was standing in front of a predator and had been talking to it as if it were prey. I healed them both. I did not announce it. I held my hand out, palm flat, fingers open, the same gesture the family code used for blessing after a successful initiation, and poured high-rank restoration magic into the 2 bodies on the floor until every bruise, every tremor, every thread of damage I had caused was gone. The stone dust on Marcus's robe smoothed. The trembling in Helen's hands stopped. Their lungs steadied. Their heartbeats normalized. I could hear both. They rose to their feet because the magic did not give them a choice. It put their bodies back the way they had been before they decided to attack their own son, and bodies that functional do not stay on the ground. Marcus stared at me with the look of a man who had expected to die and was now trying to figure out why he had not. I told him, "I hold the power of life and death over you." The sentence came out in the same flat register I had used since the finger. "When I want your deaths, that will be the time of your deaths, not before, not on your schedule." He believed me. I could see it in the way his shoulders settled, not relaxing, just accepting the new architecture of the room. Marcus believing, with every bone the healing had just restored, that his son could end him whenever he chose, and had decided that today was not the day. That was the punishment, not dying, living with it. I walked to the table where the family book still lay open to the page that had erased my name. The ink from the ritual was still wet on the quill beside it. I picked up the quill, dipped it in the ritual's own ink, and wrote a single line beneath my erased name. The same threat, inscribed in the family's own instrument, so it would live in their records the way my name no longer did. Every future generation of the Cross family would open that book and find, on the page where Adrian Cross was supposed to disappear, a promise written in the family's own hand. I set the quill down. The ink dried fast. Then I walked to the threshold of the chamber and stopped. The door was open. The road was dark. The air outside was cooler than the air inside, and it smelled like nothing. No incense, no old stone, no family code soaked into the walls over generations. Just air. I turned. The witnesses were still lined along the walls. Marcus and Helen were standing where I had left them, whole and quiet and watching me the way animals watch a storm that has decided to pass over them. I told them my dreams, not because they deserved to know, because I wanted it said aloud in front of witnesses, in the chamber where they had tried to erase me, in a voice that would carry through whatever version of this night the family chose to remember. 2 things. I held up a finger. I am going to marry the most beautiful girl in the world. I held up a second finger, and I am going to become the strongest hero anyone has ever seen. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. I did not elaborate. I did not explain where I was going or how I planned to find either of those things. I had no weapon. I had no money. I had no name that the world outside this house would recognize. I had a body the system called Level 1 and a mind that had outlived civilizations. And I had 2 dreams stated aloud in a room full of people who would spend the rest of their lives trying to decide whether they had heard me right. I stepped across the threshold. The air met my face and it was clean. The road stretched out in front of me toward a world I had not seen in 100 million years, and the sky above it was full of stars I had forgotten existed. And somewhere in a direction I did not yet know, there was a princess who had once been cruel to me in a way that turned out to be the only kindness anyone had ever shown me. I did not look back. The door behind me stayed open. The family could close it whenever they wanted. It would not change anything. The boy they erased was already walking, and the road was wide, and the night was young, and I had nowhere in particular to be except forward. I started walking. Somewhere behind me, I imagined Marcus still standing in the chamber, staring at the book on the table, reading the line I had written, and just beginning, to understand what it meant that I had healed him instead of finishing him. He would have the rest of his life to work it out. That was fine. I had things to do. The Underguild smelled the way competence smells when it has given up on hygiene. I walked in through the front door because I did not have a back door, a contact, or a reputation. I had nothing. I had walked out of the Cross family estate the night before with 2 dreams and the clothes on my body, and one of those dreams required information I could not get from polite society. The Underguild was not polite society. It was the only information broker in the city that did not require a family crest, a membership card, or a minimum level above one. The receptionist behind the counter was bald, wide, and built like someone had stacked 2 barrels on top of each other and given the top one a face. He looked at me the way a butcher looks at a chicken that has wandered into the shop on its own legs. He recognized me. I could see the recognition in his mouth before it reached his brain, the twitch at the corner, the almost smile that meant he knew exactly who the Cross family had just thrown away and exactly how much that information was worth to him as entertainment. He asked what I wanted. I told him I needed the location of Princess Diana. He laughed. Not a polite laugh, the kind that comes from the belly and is meant to carry across a room so that everyone in earshot can share in the joke of a level 1 boy walking into the Underguild and asking for the address of the most beautiful woman alive. He said the information would cost 2 million Ts. I did not have 2 million Ts. I did not have 2 Ts, but I had spent 100 million subjective years learning how to collapse the distance between a question and an answer, and most of those methods did not require money. The space compression hit before he finished grinning. Rank 25, no incantation, no hand sign, no chant, no visible buildup. The air around the receptionist folded inward, and he was suddenly standing inside a pocket of subspace no larger than a closet. Same room, same floor, same lamplight, but the walls had closed to arm's length on every side, and the exit was wherever I decided it was. He stopped laughing. I summoned a rank 25 lightning lance in my free hand. The light from the bolt turned the amber lamplight white. I held it the way you hold a pen, loosely, with the point aimed at nothing in particular, and explained that the price had changed. The receptionist talked. Diana lived in a villa in the southern forest, alone, no guards, no staff, no visitors. The empire had stopped pretending she existed. She was the emperor's daughter, and she was universally hated by the court, by the city, by her own father. The receptionist called her the worst beautiful girl in the world. He said the phrase like it was a title everyone agreed on. I dismissed the subspace pocket with a snap. The receptionist stumbled back to his counter, pale and breathing through his mouth. His coworker asked what had happened. The receptionist said something I did not stay to hear. The walk to the southern forest took about an hour on foot. I used the time the way I had used most of my 100 million years, thinking about someone who was not there. The receptionist had said she was hated. The court had said she was dangerous. The royal family had said she was a stain on the lineage. I had heard every variation of that sentence applied to myself inside the Cross family house, and I knew exactly what it meant when the people with the power to protect you chose, instead, to agree with the people who wanted you gone. A year ago, I had been starving on a street in the capital. I had been level 1, alone, and too weak to stand. A girl had found me there. She had not helped me the way a kind person helps. She had not offered food or shelter or a single gentle word. What she had done was turn to Marcus, who had been standing over me like a man inspecting a spill he was deciding whether to clean, and she had said something to him in a voice cold enough to make a patriarch flinch. I did not hear the words. I saw the effect. Marcus backed away from me and did not come back that day. She saved my life in the most twisted way I had ever seen anyone save anything. She walked away afterward without looking back, and I never learned her name until the receptionist at the Underguild said it out loud this morning. Diana. The villa appeared through the trees like something the forest was trying to swallow. 2 stories, stone walls going green with moss, a gate that had not been locked in what looked like months. No lanterns lit in the windows. I pushed the gate open and walked in. The princess was in the living room. She was bathing in the living room, an actual full-size bath set into the center of the stone floor, as if someone had decided that privacy was a concept invented by people who cared what other people thought, and she had stopped caring a long time ago. Steam rose off the water in slow white curtains. Through the vapor, I could see posture, upright, shoulders squared, chin tilted slightly to one side, the way a woman tilts her chin when she knows someone has walked in and has decided before the door finished opening that the someone does not matter. Her face was half hidden by the steam. Her eyes were not. She greeted me in baby talk, a lisp, a coo. She said she had thought I was a bandit and was relieved to see I was only a cockroach. She said she was the supreme being and did not take orders from insects. I asked her to get dressed so we could talk. She said no. She said it with the inflection of a woman declining a business proposal she had already forgotten hearing. None of my training had prepared me for a teenage girl in a bath, declining to put on clothes with the confidence of an empress who had just been told the weather was nice. So I looked at her face, because the face was where the truth lived. Emerald-tinged blonde hair, cut into a medium bob that framed her jawline and stopped at her shoulders. A face that did not look like it belonged to a real person. The proportions were too clean, the bone structure too precise, the kind of face that makes you check whether you are dreaming and then makes you annoyed that you checked. Fair skin, slim build visible only in the line of her shoulders above the water. An expression that mixed mischief and ice in a ratio I could not figure out. And the eyes, green, cold, almond-shaped and slightly downturned at the outer corners. The kind of eyes that looked at the world the way a surgeon looks at a patient who is about to hear bad news. Every other part of her performance, the baby talk, the lisp, the supreme being routine, was theater. The eyes were the part she could not fake. Something in those eyes had already given up. I noted it. I filed it. I told her my name was Adrian Cross and that I had come to marry her. She called me a cockroach again. The conversation was off to a promising start. She got dressed eventually, not because I asked, because the water got cold. What she put on was a layered thing that looked like it had been designed by someone who could not decide between a battle uniform and a formal gown, and had settled for both. Emerald green base layer, white and gold trim along the edges. The kind of outfit that said she had been raised in a palace, even if the palace had thrown her out. I asked if she remembered me. She thought about it. Her eyes moved to the upper left, the way people's eyes move when they are actually searching memory instead of pretending to. She found what she was looking for. She told me I was the cockroach she had failed to kill yesterday. She corrected herself. No, not a cockroach, a sewer rat, a stain on the concept of humanity, a creature she should have been more thorough about removing from the world when she had the chance. The insults came in order, measured, precise, each one targeted at something specific: my appearance, my level, my family, the particular way I stood in her living room as if I belonged there. She delivered them the way a fencer delivers cuts: economical, aimed, and meant to land in the soft parts. I stood there and let them land, not because they hurt. 100 million years of solitude teaches you the difference between pain and noise, and this was noise. But the precision was interesting. She had measured me. She had noticed my posture, my breathing pattern, the specific places where a boy who had been thrown away by his family might still be tender. She had cataloged every weakness I might have and chosen the exact words that would hit each one. That kind of attention takes time. That kind of cruelty takes study. A woman who hates a stranger does not study him first. A woman who has been thinking about a stranger for a year does. I understood in that moment exactly why the world called her the worst beautiful girl alive. And I understood in the same moment that the world had not bothered to read past the first page. She told me she was busy. She said she was preparing to die and would prefer to do it without an audience. I did not let that sentence pass. She said it the way you say you are going to the market. Flat, practical, already looking past it toward the next task. The preparation was administrative. There was paperwork involved. There was a schedule. She had penciled in her own death between lunch and the thing she was never going to do on Tuesday. I asked her why. Her face changed. Not much. The mischief dropped out of her expression the way a coin drops out of a pocket. You hear the clink, and by the time you look down, it is already on the floor. What was left was calm. The kind of calm that comes from having carried something alone for so long that the weight has stopped feeling like weight and started feeling like the shape of your body, she explained. Behind her villa, behind the garden, past the tree line, down a path that no one walked anymore, there was a labyrinth, the hollow labyrinth, the deepest dungeon in the world, the one the adventurer rankings did not even bother to list because listing it would require admitting that the ranking system did not go high enough. At the very bottom of the labyrinth, there was a door. Behind the door, there was a monster. The monster had an existence value of 1 trillion. I let that number sit in my head for a moment. The strongest being I had met during 100 million years of training had been in the low billions. 1 trillion was not a number that belonged to a living creature. 1 trillion was the kind of number you put on a natural disaster and then stop counting. She told me the monster would emerge from the door in a matter of days. Something called the world law prevented the creature from destroying everything instantly. A structural rule baked into the fabric of reality that slowed apocalyptic threats the way a dam slows a flood. The dam was cracking. The door would open. The monster would come through. And then it would eat the world the way a fire eats a house, room by room, until there was nothing left to burn. Her plan was to give her life to seal the door before it opened. 1 death. Everyone else lives. She had known this since before she was born. The knowledge was engraved on her soul, she said, the way a date is engraved on a headstone. She had spent her entire life carrying the answer to a question no one else believed was real, and the answer was her. She said she had too much pride to ask anyone to die beside her. I looked at her standing in the middle of her own living room, dressed in that green and gold layered outfit, her hair still damp from the bath, her eyes carrying the calm of someone who had already finished grieving for herself and was now just waiting for the clock to run out. She was 17. She was the strongest mortal being alive. Level 700, existence value 999, the ceiling the world law allowed. I saw the stats flicker briefly through my property eye, like a readout on a screen no one else could see. She was the ceiling, and the ceiling was not enough. I told her I had come to propose to her. The words left my mouth and died in the air between us like a match dropped into a lake. She did not react. She did not register it as a proposal. She looked at me the way you look at a child who has said something accidentally profound and does not know it. I shifted. Fast. The proposal was dead. The next thing out of my mouth was practical. Then we kill it, I said. If the monster dies, you do not have to. She shook her head. Not with anger, with the patience of someone explaining gravity to a person who has just suggested that falling is optional. She told me it was impossible. Her existence value was 999. Even if every living creature on the planet combined their strength, the number would not close. The gap was not a gap. The gap was a law of nature. I did not argue. Not yet. Not out loud. The math sat in the air between us like a wall she had built with numbers. She believed the numbers because the numbers were all she had ever been given. She had never met anyone who had trained outside the system that produced those numbers. She had never met anyone the world law had decided to call level 1, while the universe quietly disagreed. She did not know what I was. I had not told her. I had not earned the right to tell her, and telling her now would sound like the boast of an attention-seeking lunatic who had wandered into a dying woman's house to make himself feel important. So I kept my mouth shut. The phase ended there, me standing in Diana's living room, my proposal in ruins, her death scheduled, and a new objective forming behind my eyes that I had not said out loud yet. I was going to kill the monster. I was going to walk into the deepest labyrinth in the world and break the door she was planning to seal with her own body. I just had not told her yet. Diana snapped her fingers and her outfit appeared in a single breath. The outfit was absurd. An emerald green 12-layered kimono-style battle dress that had no business existing on a human body, with white and gold trim along every edge, a gold sash at the waist, and so many folds of silk that the total fabric area was roughly equivalent to a handkerchief. I did not understand the engineering. I did not try to. She picked up the conversation where it had left off. The world law caps mortal existence values at 999, she said. Her voice was the lecture voice, flat, precise, like she was explaining rain to someone she suspected was too stupid to understand water. The Emperor sits at around 500. The strongest human warrior alive sits at 812. I sit at 999, the ceiling, and the thing behind the door under her house had an existence value of 1 trillion. The gap between Diana and the monster was not a gap. It was a different universe. She could fight at the ceiling of mortal power for the rest of her life and never climb a single step closer to a being that existed on the other side of godhood. That was the math. I told her the ceiling did not apply to me. Her eyes narrowed. One eyebrow moved a fraction of an inch. The baby talk performance was gone, and the real Diana was looking straight through me. I said my existence value was 170,000. She laughed. Not the fake lisp laugh she had used in the bath. The real one, sharp and brief and almost furious. Like I had told her a joke that was too cruel to be funny. She told me that was childish nonsense, and I should take my delusions elsewhere. I opened my mouth to explain. I was still working through the math in my head, even at level 700, which my level 1 body would never reach. My existence value could only climb to about 100 million. 1 trillion was still impossible, but 170,000 was so far above 999 that the rules she believed in had already stopped applying. And if I could just, the front door exploded. She stood in the doorway with the remains of the door settling around her feet. Long crimson hair past her shoulders, sharp amber eyes aimed directly at Diana. A martial arts outfit that looked like it had been designed for someone who expected to fight and win inside the next 30 seconds. She was my age, late teens, maybe exactly 17, and she carried herself the way someone carries themselves when 60,000 years of training have replaced every human instinct with combat geometry. She introduced herself, Eve Crimson. I took a step back, not out of fear, out of habit. 100 million years of reading combat entrances had taught me to clear the sightline first and evaluate second. Eve's introduction was not conversation. It was ritual. She spoke formally, stated her name, stated her intent. She explained, in the measured tone of someone reciting a verdict she had rehearsed for decades, that she had come to kill Diana. Not for the world, she said. She did not care about the world. She cared about not dying. And the prophecy that tied Diana to the trillion monster worked both ways. If Diana died, the seal held, and Eve's life was no longer on the balance. Diana asked how she knew about the prophecy. Both women confirmed they had known since before they were born. Diana, calmly, said she intended to die anyway. Eve did not need to do this. Eve did not believe her. She had spent 60,000 years preparing for this exact moment, and her sense of survival could not survive trusting a stranger to handle her death sentence. I used my property eye. The numbers came back wrong. Level 890. Existence value, 1200, 1200. 200 points above the cap that was supposed to be unbreakable. I had spent over 10 million years to break through 999. Eve looked like she was 17. The math did not work unless she had used the same tool I had. Eve confirmed it. She named the Soul Gate, 60,000 subjective years inside it, training alone, pushing past the wall that no mortal was supposed to break. 60,000 years against my 100 million. The difference mattered. but the fact that someone else had used the gate at all changed the shape of everything I thought I knew about this world. Eve raised her hands and activated what she called the vow of exposure, a ceremony that required her to announce her elemental weakness aloud. She said it was Earth. In exchange, the vow gave her a 21% power boost for the duration of the fight. The ritual was structured around honesty. You reveal what can kill you, and the revelation makes you harder to kill. There was a terrible poetry to it. She turned to Diana and told her this would be the death blow. Eve gathered everything she had. I could feel it in the air, the compression of energy that happens when a martial artist commits every particle of their existence to a single strike. The aura around her body tightened like a fist closing. Her amber eyes went flat. She aimed at Diana and she fired the dimension cannon, a beam of concentrated force that, if the world law had not been in place, could have unraveled the fabric of the space it traveled through. Eve had compressed everything into a single point of light and launched it at Diana. Diana watched it come. I saw her face in the moment before the beam reached her. Time does something strange when a person believes they are about to die. It does not slow down, exactly. It opens. Everything the person has been holding behind their composure suddenly becomes visible on the surface of their skin, and the performance they have been giving drops away because there is no audience left to give it for. Diana's performance dropped. I saw every year of it. Every year of refusing help. Every year of insulting the people who tried to reach her. Every year of telling herself that she had chosen to die alone, and that the choice was rational, and the math was clean, and the pride was earned. I saw the tears. She was crying. She did not know she was crying. Her eyes were open, and her mouth was closed, and the water ran down her face like something her body was doing without consulting her. Because the body has opinions the mind has not learned to overrule, and the body's opinion in that moment was that she was afraid. Her face said everything she would not. I had been reading her tells the way you read a sentence in a language you learned a long time ago. The precision of her insults, the steadiness of her performance, the single beat of hesitation before every dismissal. And in the half second before the beam reached her, the last tell dropped. Someone help me. I stepped into the beam. The dimension cannon hit me in the chest. The light scattered around my body in every direction. White, then gold, then silence. The beam broke against me, the way water breaks against a cliff face. I did not move. I did not bend. The room went quiet the way a battlefield goes quiet when one side has just realized the other side is not from the same world. I turned my head toward Eve. I am going to destroy your misconception, I said, that bad endings are real. Eve did not accept it. She came at me with the scarlet lightning, a grim arts elbow strike she had polished across decades, aimed past me at Diana. The technique was beautiful. The form was flawless. The trajectory was surgically angled to bypass my body and reach the girl behind me. I tripped her. 1 foot. No shift in my stance. She went down on her back and lay there on the floor of Diana's living room, staring up at the ceiling with the expression of someone whose universe had just turned inside out. Her perception magic, the seventh eye, the tool she had spent years mastering, tried to read me. I felt it hit my fake aura and slide off like rain on glass. She was looking for data and finding nothing, because the permanent aura I carried was not a technique I activated. It was part of me. It had been part of me since somewhere around year 30 million, and no perception system built inside the normal rules of this world could see through it. I told her, mildly, that 60,000 years in the Soul Gate had brought her to the surface of grim arts. I told her she had talent. I told her she was strong. Then I mentioned, with the kind of dry indifference that only comes from having said it too many times to care, that I was still labeled level 1 by the world's system, talentless, incompetent, the lowest possible assessment a soul could receive, and I activated the demigod form. The light was not like Eve's. Eve's aura had been compression, force packed tight, aimed to kill. The demigod light was the opposite. It expanded. It filled the room the way dawn fills a valley, not by arriving, but by being there all at once, as if it had always been there, and the only thing that had changed was that the eyes in the room could finally perceive it. Eve saw it. I watched what it did to her. The combat geometry dropped out of her posture. The 60,000 years of training dropped out of her face. What was left was a girl who had been alone for 60,000 years in a space designed to make her stronger and had never once, in all that time, been in the presence of a light that made her feel small in a way that felt good. She knelt. The tears came fast, and she did not try to stop them. She went to her knees on the floor of Diana's living room, and she wept. And when she could speak again, the first thing she said was a request. She asked to be allowed to become the jewel that adorned me. I stood there with the demigod form fading, and a girl on her knees in front of me, and 100 million years of solitude telling me that I did not know how to do this. I had learned how to be alone, the way most people learn how to breathe, and worship was a language I had never been given the textbook for. So I did what I do when I do not know what to do. I deflected. I told her, in the most awkward joking tone I have ever used, that if she wanted to follow me around, she would have to accept one condition: that I was a disaster of a human being, that I had no social skills, that I had been a teenager alone in a cave for longer than civilizations last, and that the first time I made a fool of myself in public, she was not allowed to pretend she did not know me. She took it as a sacred oath. She bowed her head and repeated the condition back to me word for word, as though I had issued a royal decree, and I realized with a sinking feeling that this woman had no concept of jokes. 60,000 years of combat training and 0 minutes of comedy education. She was going to take everything I said at face value for the rest of our lives, and there was nothing I could do about it. Diana watched from the couch. Her arms were crossed. Her face wanted to be contemptuous, and it was not entirely succeeding. Diana scolded me for the entire subordinate acceptance scene. She called it undignified. She called it embarrassing. She said she had watched the most powerful martial artist to set foot in her villa in a year, get tripped onto her back, and then fall in love with the man who tripped her. And she wanted both of us to know that the display had been the most pathetic thing she had witnessed since she started keeping track. I let her finish. The room settled. Eve knelt beside me, head bowed, hands folded in her lap, radiating the kind of contentment that only comes from a person who has finally found the place where their purpose now points. Diana sat on the couch, legs crossed, watching me with the eyes that never matched her performance. The conversation shifted. Diana asked about the soul gate. Eve had one. I had one. Diana wondered quietly if she might have access to one as well. I told her I did not know the conditions. The gate had appeared for me without warning, and Eve confirmed the same. Then I asked her to stop trying to die. The words came out plainer than I meant them to. No deflection, no comedy, no 100 million-year-old sarcasm to blunt the edge. I asked her to stop, and I meant it. Diana's response was ice. She leaned forward and laid out the math the way a general lays out a map before explaining why the position is already lost. If you have 170,000, she said, then kill me. Seal the door. The trillion enemy disappears. You walk out alive. You walk out powerful. You walk out free. You could do anything you want with this world. The math is clean. I agreed. The math was clean. She was right. Killing her would seal the door, remove the threat, and leave me standing in a world where nothing could touch me. It was the rational play. It was what anyone with a brain and a spine and a survival instinct would choose. I chose the irrational option. I told her I was fighting the trillion enemy myself. I told her I was doing it because she was the only person in my entire life who had ever helped me. The room went still. Even Eve, who had been kneeling in her private communion with loyalty, lifted her head. I told Diana about the day we met, a year ago, a street in the capital. I had been starving, level 1, too weak to stand. Marcus had been standing over me, my father, the man who had thrown me away, finishing the job he had started at home, and a girl had walked up to him. She had not offered me food. She had not offered me shelter. She had not spoken a single kind word to me. What she had done was turn to Marcus and say something in a voice that made a patriarch flinch, and he had backed away, and he had not come back that day. She had saved my life in the most twisted way anyone had ever saved anything, And then, before she walked away, she had turned to me. She had told me that gratitude is shown through action, not words. She had told me that if I wanted to thank her, I should become the world's greatest hero and save her one day. I decided then. The decision had not changed. Not in the 100 million years I spent inside the gate. Not in the months after I came out. Not in the walk to the Underguild, or the walk through the forest, or the moment I pushed open her gate and found her bathing in the living room, as if she had been waiting for someone to arrive and had run out of patience deciding who. I had two dreams: marry the most beautiful girl in the world, become the strongest hero. Both of them traced back to the girl sitting across from me in an absurd kimono, calling me stupid because she was the only person in this world who had ever treated me like I was worth saving. Diana said nothing for a long time. Her face did the thing her face did when the performance was failing: the slight compression around the mouth, the micro adjustment in the eyes, the hairline crack in the composure that she would paper over in 3 seconds and pretend had never been there. "You are stupid," she said. The hollow labyrinth waited behind the house, days until the door opened. I had committed to the impossible fight. The three of us left at dawn. I had not slept. There was nothing wrong with my body. 100 million years of training had given me the ability to function without rest for weeks. But the night had been long and full of math I did not want to finish. The deep door, the trillion existence value enemy behind it. 2 days, maybe less. I told Diana I was doing this for myself, that the enemy behind the door was the only thing left in this world strong enough to make me the strongest hero, and that was the only reason I was walking toward it. She watched me the way she watched everything, with eyes that already knew what I was going to say before I finished saying it. "I never helped you," she said. Her voice had that baby talk register, the one she used when she wanted the world to think she was a child playing dress-up, instead of the most dangerous woman on the continent. "A year ago, your father was annoying me, that is all. I do not recall any kindness." The level of detail in her denial was the tell. "You do not remember a day in that much precision if it meant nothing to you," I said mildly. That she seemed to remember it just fine. "Do not get the wrong idea." She looked away. The performance held, but the seam showed. Eve walked 2 steps behind us, hands clasped, radiating something between worship and tactical readiness. She had started calling me my lord again. I told her to stop. She said, "Yes, my lord," and meant it as compliance. I did not correct her a second time. The hollow labyrinth opened its throat, and we walked into it. Emperor-class monsters appeared in the corridors, existence values in the 300s, the 500s, the kind of numbers that would have crushed a normal adventuring party. Eve took the first wave without breaking stride. I took the second. Diana watched from behind, arms folded, and I caught the edge of something on her face that was not quite contempt, closer to curiosity. We moved through the mid-levels for hours. The traps were old and well-maintained. The dimension lock hummed in the walls. No teleportation, no shortcuts, no running. Whoever built this place wanted you to walk the entire way down or not come at all. Eve handled herself like she had been born down here. Her movements were clean, efficient, almost bored. 60,000 years of gait training showing in every rotation of her wrist. I wondered briefly if she had been this calm the first time she descended into a hole that wanted to kill her. Probably not. Nobody is calm the first time. Somewhere around the 6th hour, I noticed marks on the stone that were not erosion, claw gouges, scorch patterns. Someone had fought their way through this corridor recently, and hard. The burns were fresh enough that the stone still smelled like ozone. I filed it and said nothing. By nightfall, we had cleared the last staircase. The floor leveled out. The corridor widened into something that was not a corridor anymore. It was a chamber, vast and still, and at the far end of it stood the deep door. And sitting in front of the door, eating something small and round, was a slime. The slime was about the size of a watermelon, blue-green, translucent, cheerful in a way that felt rehearsed over centuries. It had 2 large dark eyes and a round body that sat on the stone like it had been there since before the stone was quarried. "Good evening," it said. The voice was polite, warm, and absolutely clear. "My name is Nick. Species, ancient god slime. Identification number, 000000001. I have 3 jobs. I used property eye. Nothing came back. The readout was blank. Not low, not hidden, just absent. That meant one of two things. Either this slime had no stats worth reading, or this slime was strong enough to block the red entirely. Job 1, Nick continued, unbothered. I greet the heroes who reach this door. Welcome, you are here. Job 2, I inform you that the enemy with an existence value of 1 trillion will emerge from beyond this door in approximately 2 days. Perhaps sooner. The timeline is flexible. 2 days. I had committed to this fight knowing it was coming, but hearing the number spoken aloud by a slime sitting on a dungeon floor made it land differently. Your party already knew about the trillion enemy, yes? Nick tilted his round body toward Diana and Eve. Since before we were born, Diana said. No performance in it, just fact. Nick nodded. Or did the slime equivalent, which was a slow forward bob of his entire body. That simplifies things. Job 3. The cheerfulness did not leave his voice. The temperature in the chamber dropped. I am the cleaner, he said. Heroes who reach this door but have not earned the right to face what is behind it, I remove them. I asked how strong he was. Oh, very weak. He said it the way a man holding a loaded cannon says he prefers diplomacy. Around 20 million. 20 million. Eve had been the strongest thing I had ever fought. Nick stood up from his spot by the door. The aura that filled the chamber was quiet and enormous, the kind of pressure that does not announce itself because it does not need to. He charged. He was faster than anything I had ever seen at that scale. My demigod form bought me enough time to not die in the first exchange. That was the extent of what it bought me. Nick's strikes landed in places I had not finished deciding to guard, and every impact rattled through the enhancement magic like it was paper. I threw everything the form had, speed, aura density, raw output, and none of it touched him. He was not dodging. He was simply occupying a space my attacks did not reach. So I stopped trying to match him and started emptying the vault. The War King's sword wings came first, floating blades that operated independently, each one capable of tracking a target and striking from angles the wielder's body could not reach. I sent all of them at Nick like guided projectiles and watched them close from 6 directions at once. Nick read the pattern in a heartbeat. He noted, cheerfully, that my concentration was split. The sword wings required intense focus to operate, and that focus came at the cost of my own combat output. He was right. He closed the gap and prepared the dimension cannon, but the split focus was the card. The self-exposure was fake. I threw the summoning chips in the gap Nick had opened and called the Cursed Soldier, a hollow-eyed warrior bound by contract, armed with cursed bullets designed to cripple regeneration. The soldier materialized between us and opened fire. Nick's dimension cannon hit me before the bullets hit him. The impact took my right side apart, the kind of wound that should have ended any normal warrior. Light went white. Sound went underwater. For a half second, I was nowhere. High-tier healing magic dragged me back. The wound closed. The pain did not. The cursed bullets found Nick. He staggered. The cheerful composure cracked for exactly 1 second. He vomited, slowed, and the regeneration that had made him untouchable stuttered under the curse's weight. Now, I triggered the summoning circle. The dark light column rose from the ground and assembled around me. Plates, limbs, helm, core, each piece fusing to my body in sequence. The Killing God exogear locked into place, and the suit's voice, flat and mechanical, confirmed the merge was complete. I exploded off the floor. Nick was still shaking off the cursed bullets when I closed the distance. There is a kind of joy that lives underneath everything else, underneath the fear, the math, the knowledge that you were outmatched. It is the joy of something you spent 1 billion years building, finally working the way you built it to work. I had doubted the training. In the dark years, the lonely years, I had doubted whether any of it was worth anything at all. The flash fist, the single straight punch I had honed for 1 billion subjective years inside the gate, the cleanest attack in my entire arsenal, connected with his center mass. Every ounce of the exogear's output, every thread of aura I had left, every refinement of muscle memory, compressed into one straight line. Nick went into the far wall. The chamber cracked. Dust fell from the ceiling. The echo of the impact rang for longer than the punch itself had lasted. I stood over the downed slime in a suit that was already sputtering and thought, for exactly 1 paragraph of my own internal narration, I did it. Then the exogear deactivated. Mana exhaustion. The sword wings retracted. The cursed soldier dissolved into smoke. Every trump card I had built across 100 million years of solitude was spent, gone, empty. 2 days until the trillion enemy arrived. I had nothing left. I had built every one of those weapons for the real fight. High spec, high output, single use, designed to end a god. Instead, I had spent them all on the gatekeeper. The regret landed like a physical thing. Nick got up. He did it slowly, almost politely, the way someone rises from a chair when they have decided the conversation is finally worth having. The wall behind him was cratered. He did not seem to notice. "That punch," he said. The cheerfulness was still there, but underneath it was something I had not heard before: sincerity. That was genuinely impressive. I waited for the word that I already knew was coming, but I was warming up. His existence value, his real one, the one he had been sitting on the whole time, landed in the chamber like a dropped mountain. 89 billion. My brain did something I can only describe as a glitch. The slime I had just emptied my entire arsenal to defeat had been playing. Nick's body shifted. Arms grew from his sides. Not 2, not 4, but enough that counting them felt beside the point. His face cracked open into something demonic and ancient. The round, cheerful slime was gone. What stood in front of the deep door now was a hollow mother god wearing the ruins of politeness. He stacked his buffs one layer at a time. The first layer was a golden aura that filled the chamber like liquid light. The second added lightning, real lightning, arcing between his new arms, striking the floor in patterns. The third was simply brightness, the kind of brightness that makes you forget what dark looked like. I backed up. Not because I chose to, because my body made the decision for me. The aura pouring off Nick was the kind of madness that the next half second would impose on anyone still standing in its path. Diana stepped up behind me. I felt her there before I saw her. The baby talk was gone. The performance was gone. What was left was a voice I had never heard from her. Plain, steady, and completely sincere. "You cannot win against 89 billion. I did not answer. "I saw what you did against the 20 million. Her hand was close to my back, but did not touch it. That was real. I know that was real. And I am grateful. Grateful. The word sounded foreign in her mouth. A word she had never used for anyone. Offered here, at the bottom of a labyrinth, to a boy she had called a cockroach 3 days ago. Live and be free, Adrian. The silence after she said it was the loudest thing in the chamber. She was releasing me, not from a contract, from the promise I had made in her living room. She was telling me I could walk away and keep my dignity. I listened to every word. I let them land. I understood that she meant them completely. A smarter man would have taken the offer. A man with less time behind him would have nodded, accepted the gift of a dignified retreat, and walked back up those stairs with his life intact. Then I turned back toward Nick and poured what was left of my aura into rotation. Every reserve, every scrap, the flash fist one more time. Not because I thought it would work, but because I had exactly one response to the impossible. Keep moving forward. The punch connected. It did nothing. Nick looked at me the way a teacher looks at a student who has given the wrong answer but shown the work. He summoned a long blade from somewhere I could not track, and what came next was a horizontal cut delivered too fast to see. The kind of wound a body does not return from. I hit the floor. Behind me, somewhere in the blue-lit dark, I heard Eve's voice. Quiet, almost reverent, amazing. The stone was cold under my face. The blood was warm. The ceiling was very far away, and the deep door's glow was the only light still reaching my eyes. I was not done. The words came out before I decided to say them, scraped from somewhere deeper than the pain, deeper than the math, deeper than the 100 million years. They were not brave. They were not dramatic. They were just the only thing left. I am not done yet. The voice came while I was still bleeding. 1 second, I was on the labyrinth floor with Nick's strike still ringing through my skeleton, and the next, I was somewhere else entirely. The gate. The same pale walls, the same hum in the stone, the same smell of nothing at all. I had been here before, 100 million years before. My body was already inside the healing capsule by the time I understood what had happened, and the wound that should have killed me was closing like a seam, being sewn shut by something that did not care whether I wanted to live or not. The gate's voice told me what it had neglected to mention the first time around. Anyone who uses the Nightmare Soul Gate must enter it once a day, every day, for the rest of their life. Miss a day, and the contract kills you. No negotiation, no appeal, no grace period. The voice delivered this the way a clerk reads a fine print clause to someone who already signed. Then it told me the rest. The daily curse could be lifted under exactly one condition. If Diana died, the contract would dissolve. Her death was the only release valve the system permitted. The gate was not recommending it. The gate was not editorializing. It was informing me of the terms I had already agreed to. I considered the offer for the time it took to draw one breath. No, I did not weigh it. I did not run the math. I did not picture her face and then decide. The answer was just there, the way a reflex is there. I told the gate no, and I felt privately proud of myself for about half a second before the pride turned into the quiet understanding that I had just chained myself to this place forever. 3 sessions. That was what the gate said I had left before the trillion enemy arrived. 3 entries, including this one. I sat up in the capsule, rolled my shoulders, felt the new skin pull where the old skin used to be, and walked toward the workshop. The count began. I started with the sword. The War King's sword wings were the highest leverage weapon I owned, and 100 million years of training without fixing them first would compound every gap in my arsenal. I tried the obvious approach, poured everything into raw offense, made the blade so sharp it could not be held without cutting the user. After 10 days, I could barely swing it. After 300 days, I understood that pure offense without structural balance was a weapon that fought its own wielder. I did not have the crafting knowledge to fix the problem, so I went to the library and sat down with the basics. 150 years on fundamentals. 2,300 years before I thought I was ready. I was not. 60,000 years before I admitted I might never be. 1 million years before I finally saw it. The weapon was not a blade. It was a puzzle. Silhouette and conductivity. The shape of the edge determined what the aura could carry, and the aura determined what the edge could cut. Once I understood that, the reforging took 4 million more years of patient adjustment. 5 million years total since the count began. The sword was done. Next, myself. I set a training room opponent to 20 million existence value, Nick's base form. I fought that ghost every waking hour for 5 million years and could not win. The gap was not skill. The gap was 19.8 million units of raw existence value, and no amount of technique closed a canyon that wide without the foundation underneath it. But I kept going because there was nothing else to do in here, and because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant counting the years ahead of me, and counting the years ahead of me meant vomiting on the training room floor. At 10 million years, I won. The ghost dropped. I stood over it with my hands shaking and my vision swimming and the taste of iron in the back of my throat. And I thought, that is 1/10 of the way. 1/10. The rest was still out there, stretching ahead of me like a hallway with no door at the end. I cried. I'm not going to dress that up. I stood in the training room at the 10 million year mark and cried like the child I technically still was, because it was painful and hard, and there was no one to hear it and no reason to pretend otherwise. Then I started laughing. Not because anything was funny, because the alternative to laughing was true madness. And I had learned that controlled insanity was a survival mechanism. You perform the breakdown. You schedule the rage, the self-loathing, the childish tantrums. You let the pressure out in doses so the vessel does not crack all at once. I laughed until my ribs ached, and then I went back to the training room. 30 million years. I had hunted the azurite phoenix to functional extinction and back again, grinding artifact experience bonuses until the numbers stopped meaning anything. I summoned divine beasts at random, tested each one against my build, and found that only the cursed soldier fit the way I fought. The rest were spectacular and useless. 50 million years. Halfway. I broke. I was on the floor of the training room with my face against the cold stone, and my stomach emptying itself of something that should not have still been in there after 50 million years of isolation. The number ahead of me was the same as the number behind me, and the thought that even after surviving this stretch, the next real-world morning could pull me back in for another 100 million years hit me like a physical blow. I wanted the world to end. I mean that literally. For one clear, honest moment, I wished everything outside the gate would simply stop existing so I would not have to go back to it. Then her face surfaced. Not a memory I called up, not a decision, just Diana's face, arriving the way dawn arrives, without asking permission. The girl who told me I looked like a cockroach. The girl who told me to live and be free. The girl who was planning to die quietly so the world could keep going. I got up. The phrase I had been screaming changed. I do not remember what it changed to. I only remember that it had her name in it somewhere, and that it was enough. The next 50 million years were foundation, running, breathing, aura control. The flash fist repeated until my arms forgot how to do anything else. Basic work, boring work. At 150 million years total, I hit temporary maximum output of 80 billion existence value. Growth plateaued. The gate's mechanism scaled with use, not with raw time, and I had used up what this stretch could give me. I spent the remaining 50 million years expanding the foundation for whatever came next. 200 million years, 572 billion monsters killed inside the gate. Every skill pushed past the point where the numbers had names, titles stacked on titles, and my level was still one. The system that ranks every soul in this world had spent 200 million years watching me work and decided that the number did not need updating. I noted this the way you note a weather pattern that will never change. Anyway, I stepped out of the gate the same instant I had entered it. The labyrinth floor was unchanged. Nick was still standing in his serious mode, multi-armed and golden, mid-pose, as if the universe had pressed pause on him for 1 second and then unpaused. Diana and Eve had not moved. Diana was looking at me with the slight confusion of someone who watched a wounded boy disappear and then reappear whole in the same breath. My skin was new. My stats, if anyone cared to read them, told a story the world was not ready to hear. Half God, temporary maximum existence value of 92 billion, special ability, indomitable soul, level 1, still, forever. I looked at Nick across the chamber, 89 billion existence value, and I had come back with 92. 3 billion more than the creature who had put me on the floor 1 second ago. 3 billion earned across 200 million years of solitude. I looked at Diana. She was still watching me. The confusion in her eyes was giving way to something I did not have a name for yet. I believe, I said. We were in the middle of something. The chamber began to glow. 3 billion. That was the margin. Nick stood in his serious form, towering, multi-armed, lightning arcing between every limb, and I watched him the way a man watches a clock he has already read. 89 billion existence value. Mine was 92. The difference was small enough that anyone sane would have called the fight even. But I had spent 200 million years learning how to make small differences into funerals. Nick charged his aura to the ceiling and dove into his own shadow. I counted the decoys without blinking. 3 fake aura signatures fanning out left, right, and overhead. 1 real Nick sliding through the dark toward my blind side. I knew the move before he committed to it. I left my back open anyway. He took the invitation. The real Nick surged from behind, arms raised for a strike that would have taken my head if I had been standing still. I sidestepped the way you sidestep a puddle, 1 pivot, no urgency, and swept my leg through the space where his body had been. Deep abyss flash wind, connected with what would have been his jaw if slimes had jaws. The impact sent him spinning upward. I followed with divine speed flash fist before he could stabilize. 3 rapid strikes that locked his rotation and finished the combo with the one I had been saving since I first learned it inside the gate. Dragon Flash Crushing Fist. Nick's serious mode body, the form that had terrified this chamber for centuries, popped like an overinflated balloon. The sound echoed off the walls and died. The golden aura scattered and faded. Where 89 billion existence value had been standing, there was nothing but silence and a faint shimmer settling on the stone. I lowered my fist. The 200 million years had bought exactly what I needed, just a margin. I allowed myself 1 second of satisfaction, possibly 2. I might have told the empty chamber that I could probably handle the trillion enemy now. I might have said it with the specific tone of someone who has earned the right to brag. A small voice above my head said, No, you could not. I looked up. Sitting on top of my skull, no bigger than my palm, was Nick. Same eyes, same cheerful expression, same faintly smug energy, scaled down to the size of a rice ball. He explained, with the casual authority of someone who had done this before, that when a hero defeats an ancient god slime, the slime is reborn and presented to the victor, adapted to the new master, smaller, friendlier, permanently attached. I used my property eye on him, 8.9 billion combat power. The slime who had just been 89 billion was now sitting on my head at a tenth of that, cheerful about it, and informing me that even with our combined strength, a trillion existence value enemy would erase us in a single attack. Wonderful, I said. Diana, behind me, made a sound that was almost a laugh. Eve bowed to Nick with the rigid formality she gave everything, as though he were a visiting dignitary and not a palm-sized blob perched on a teenage boy. Nick accepted the bow. He did not move from my head. We used the labyrinth's teleport, unlocked the moment Nick's serious form had shattered, and stepped out into the forest air near the mansion. Nick rode my scalp the entire way. He insulted my hair. He insulted my walking speed. He told me my combat stance had 3 flaws he could see from above. I had a familiar now. The comic relief lived on my head and would not shut up. Back in the mansion the next morning, I mentioned, casually, while Diana poured herself tea, that I had 2 more daily uses of the gate before the deadline. I bragged about my 200 million year tally. I struck a pose that deserved more respect than it received. Diana asked, without looking up from her cup, whether there was a way to lift the curse. I lied. I said no. From the top of my head, Nick's small voice cut through the room like a bell. He is lying. The curse lifts if you die. I grabbed him off my scalp and held him at arm's length. He dangled from my fingers, cheerful, unrepentant. He explained that the information had transferred to him when he became my property, and that the reincarnation contract did not permit him to support a direct deception when asked a direct question. I wanted to throw him through the window. I wanted to go back in time and let the balloon stay inflated. Diana's face changed. The performance fell away the way a curtain falls when the wire snaps. Her hand moved toward the corner of the room, toward her item box, toward something I did not let her reach. I caught her wrist before the motion finished. I did not restrain her. I pulled her, gently, until her face was against my chest and my arms were around her shoulders. I held her the way you hold something that will break if you squeeze and shatter if you let go. Bet on me, I said. She did not answer for a long time. You are already a hero, she said. Her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. You faced him without flinching. You knew what he was, and you walked in anyway. I held her tighter and told her I was going to show her a hero's back, a perfect happy ending. Everything she had decided she did not deserve. I was going to give her all of it, and she was going to stand behind me and watch. Bet on me, I said again. She called me an idiot. She called me a cockroach. She said my touch felt like her skin was rotting and that I was the worst person who had ever walked through her door. The insults were smaller than usual. Her voice cracked on the last one. Her face was wet against my shirt and she did not pull away. I noted somewhere underneath everything that we were made of the same material. 2 people whose pride would not permit them to break in front of each other. 2 people breaking anyway, just slowly enough to pretend it was not happening. I never let go of her wrist. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table and smiled. Eve noticed the shift before I had finished my first cup. She paused mid-sweep, studied my face the way she studied everything, with the reverence of someone who had learned the world from books and not from people, and asked if I had done another 100 million years. I confirmed, 100 times stronger. I could handle the trillion enemy with a single punch. I had gotten used to it, honestly. Goes to sleep, wakes up, another 100 million years done, nothing to it. I smiled harder. Eve watched me for 3 seconds longer than necessary and then resumed sweeping. After breakfast, I told Diana I was going for a walk. She wanted to come. I asked her to stay. The forest was quiet. I leaned against the trunk of a tree wide enough to hide behind and looked up through the canopy at the gray sky. The smile fell off my face, the way Nick's serious form had fallen off the world. All at once, with a sound no one heard. 300 million years, total. 200 plus another 100. My existence value had stalled at 203 billion. The gate called it a genetic ceiling. The growth rate had crashed into a wall that would take 10 billion years to break, maybe 100 billion, and I had 8 days. I ran the math in my head the way I had run it inside the gate 1,000 times. Another 100 million years might buy me another 100 billion. Optimistic. The trillion enemy would need 1,000 times that. The gap was not closing. It was laughing at me. I cursed my parents. Out loud, for the first time since the ritual chamber. Marcus and Helen and the genes they had given me. The permanent lock at level 1. The ceiling written into my blood before I was born. I had spent 200 million years refusing to think about them. The refusal ran out against a tree in a forest behind a mansion belonging to a girl I was going to die for. I swallowed it. I clenched my jaw and swallowed the self-pity the way I had swallowed every other useless thing the gate had offered me. And I looked forward and I held back the tears because I was not going to break in a forest while 2 girls were counting on me to come back smiling. "Are you all right, my lord?" Eve stood 3 paces away. I had not heard her approach. I assembled the brightest smile I had performed all week and told her I had just one-shot the trillion enemy inside my head and everything was completely, absolutely, embarrassingly fine. She did not believe me. I could see it in the tilt of her head, the small angle that meant she was reading through the performance the way I read through Nick's shadow decoys. She asked me why I did not just end Diana to make everything easier. The question landed in the quiet between us, like a stone in still water. I stood there with my back against the tree and my fake smile fading, and I searched for the answer the way you search for something you dropped in the dark. What I found was this. What I want, I said, is a hero. I told her about the hero I had wanted when I was small, before the family, before the gate, before 100 million years of learning how to be alone. The hero who shows up at the worst possible moment and solves everything by smiling and saying it is okay. The hero who fights every evil and wins every battle and stands at the end covered in dust and says the words that make the world stop hurting. I wanted to be that, even once, even if I was the only one who ever knew. Eve listened. She did not interrupt. She did not tell me the math was wrong. She did not offer a strategy. When I finished, she closed the distance between us and put her arms around me. My head settled against her shoulder. She held me without urgency, the way you hold something that has been standing too long. "I am qualified to recognize tenacity," she said, with the bizarre formality that only she could carry without it sounding wrong. "I spent 60,000 years inside the Soul Gate. I know what it costs. Your efforts are the world's #1. I guarantee it, because I am the world's #2. I broke. The tears came the way they come when you have held them for 300 million years, without permission, without warning, without any of the dignity I had spent my entire existence performing. I cried against her shoulder for longer than the narration is willing to count. These were the tears I could not shed in front of Diana, the ones that would have told her the math was impossible, the ones that would have given her permission to die. Eve did not move. She did not pretend it was not happening. When it was over, she did not pretend it had not happened either. I thanked her. My voice was rough and I did not care. I sat beside her under the tree and asked, because I had never asked, what she remembered about her life before. "Nothing," she said. Her name, her abilities, the trillion enemy, the instruction to end Diana to prevent it. She had woken up 3 days ago with no personal memories, walked until she found the Soul Gate, and spent 60,000 years inside preparing for a mission she could not remember accepting. I watched her face while she spoke. 60,000 years of solitude, and she did not know why. The gap in her history sat between us, like an unlocked door neither of us could see through. She asked me to promise her I would not die in the fight. I could not promise. The decision I had made against that tree, the quiet one, the one I had not said out loud, was that I would die for these 2 girls if the math required it. The promise would have been a lie, and I was too tired to lie anymore today. "No one can kill me," I said, the smallest possible deflection. Eve let me change the subject. She was kind that way. I came back to the mansion in the afternoon. Diana, fully restored to her performance, demanded that I sit on the sofa and serve as her cushion. I sat. She settled against me from behind. Nick, still on my head, informed us both that we looked ridiculous. Eve swept through the room with the precision of someone who would have ironed the air if she could have found a wrinkle in it. I offered her a break. She declined. She did not break from from maid duty, ever. The offer was noted and filed under things that did not require a response. The four of us spent the afternoon in the kind of quiet none of us had earned. Diana behind me on the sofa, warm and sharp-tongued and alive. Nick on my head, small and rude and loyal. Eve moving through the room like a prayer someone had dressed in an apron. The trillion enemy was 8 days away. I let myself have the afternoon anyway. The boy his family threw away got the things the boy wanted. I did not say which boy. I did not need to. Diana, resting her weight against my back, as if I were furniture she had grudgingly decided to keep, did not know. That was fine. She would find out later, the hard way, the only way either of us ever learned anything. I hated her most in the world. I was going to save her anyway. We teleported down in one blink. Nick's dimensional lock dropped the four of us onto the stone floor of the room of doors, and the temperature fell like someone had opened a window into nothing. The chamber was the size of a cathedral laid on its side. The deep door at the far wall pulsed with a low blue-white light that made the shadows move without reason. I had been here before. My body remembered the weight of the air. Nick bounced once on my head. He announced in his most cheerful voice that the safety area was ready. A shimmer of dimensional lock cut the far corner of the chamber into its own pocket. Diana stepped behind the barrier. Eve followed, glancing at me once over her shoulder. I nodded. I walked alone across the chamber floor. The deep door grew taller as I approached. I stopped a body length from the seal and stood still. My hands hung at my sides. I breathed once, then twice, and tried not to think about the card in my inventory. 2 billion subjective years of preparation had gone into that self-destruct card. It would erase anything in the chamber, including me, including anyone standing close. It was the nuclear option, the only one I had that the math said could close this fight. The only problem was the word anyone. I breathed again. The door glowed brighter. The chamber hummed. Then the glow died. The hum stopped. Nothing came through. A thin silver bracelet fell from the air in front of the door and clinked against the stone at my feet. I stared at it. I nudged it with my boot. I activated my property eye. The result came back blank. No properties, no aura signature, no curse, no stats. Just a loop of silver the width of a finger. I picked it up. I turned it over. It was just a bracelet. Behind the barrier, Eve said something quiet. She said it felt familiar. She said she thought she had seen it before. I told her it might be cursed and to stay where she was. She was already beside me. I had not seen her cross the chamber. My combat awareness had not registered the motion. She took the bracelet from my hand before the sentence finished leaving my mouth. She put it on her wrist. She breathed once, deeply, the way a person breathes when they have not breathed properly in years. Then she straightened. Her eyes changed. Something behind them woke up that had not been there a minute ago. "Eve Crimson," she said, and her voice was not her voice. "God's masterpiece, the one who will destroy this world." The bracelet, she explained, was the seal. She had woken up 4 days ago, not in the world, in the space beyond the door, and walked through before the door fully opened. The amnesia had been part of the seal's design. The instruction to kill Diana had been the seal's last performance, its final attempt to put the threat back inside. But killing Diana now would change nothing. The trillion enemy was not behind the door. The trillion enemy was in the room. I looked at the bracelet on her wrist. I looked at her eyes. I looked at the girl who had put her arms around me in the forest and let me cry against her shoulder until I ran out of reasons to pretend I was fine. Every moment since Phase 4 rewrote itself in my head. Every moment since she had knelt in front of me and called me her master. Every moment since she had swept the mansion floor with the devotion of someone who had never been allowed to care about anything small. All of it had been true. All of it had also been waiting for this. I rounded on Nick. Did you know? Nick, on my head, admitted cheerfully that he had known Eve came from beyond the door. He had known since the moment she walked into Diana's mansion. He had not mentioned it because I had never directly asked. His species, he reminded me, does not volunteer information that has not been requested. Structural limitation. Nothing personal. I filed the grudge. Structural liar by omission. I would deal with it later, assuming there was a later to deal with. Eve, the new Eve, the one with something ancient behind her eyes, was mid-explanation when her body ceased. Her hand flew to her chest. The register dropped out of her voice like a stage light going dead. For one breath, she was the girl from the forest again, the real Eve, the one who had validated my stubbornness and held my head against her shoulder. She looked at me with the eyes I recognized and said one thing: "Kill me, quickly, before it takes over." I listened. I considered it for exactly as long as I had considered the gate's offer, which is to say, I did not consider it at all. I smiled. It was the smallest smile I could manage. "I'm going to be your hero for the day," I said. Her eyes closed. When they opened, she was gone. The thing that opened its eyes in her place straightened the body like someone putting on a coat that finally fit. The aura in the chamber inverted color. The blue-white glow from the door turned black-violet, and the shadows stopped moving because there was nothing left for them to hide from. She named what she was now. The title was absurd, and she delivered it like a thesis defense. The ultimate super evil god, Eve Crimson. On her way to dismantle the world, apparently, as soon as she finished the warm-up. She mocked my choice. She called it sentimental. She said the hero speech was cute. Then, beast mode activated. Horns curled from her forehead. Dark wings unfolded from her shoulder blades in a single motion that displaced the air hard enough to push my hair back from across the chamber. Flame script tattoos burned into her arms like ink being written by a hand I could not see. The aura pressure in the room tripled, then tripled again, and my lungs had to remember how to function under weight that had not existed 3 seconds ago. Her existence value was 1 trillion. Her hit points were 999 billion. Her level was 3000. What mattered was the shape of the number, orders of magnitude above anything I had faced. My stats displayed in counterpoint, level 1. Temporary maximum existence value 203 billion. The gap was not a gap. It was a category error. I lied. I told her, casually, that the number she was reading was my fake aura, and that my real existence value was somewhere between 5 and 60 trillion. I said it the way I said most things, like I believed it just enough to make someone else believe it too. She laughed without smiling. She concentrated every drop of her aura into her right arm, held the other arm behind her back, and invited me to go first. I summoned the deck. 100 cards hit the chamber floor and transformed into 100 humanoid cursed soldiers, my battle-tested debuff carriers, the paralysis relay network I had built for situations where power alone was not enough. I ordered them into formation. My internal math confirmed what I already knew. The self-destruct card was locked. The body in front of me contained the girl I had just decided to save. The nuclear option was off the table, so I was fighting a trillion existence value god with a paralysis trick and a smile. The hero business was going exactly as well as I deserved. I named my elemental weakness aloud, the vow of exposure. The words left my mouth, and the paralysis from the cursed soldier's relay landed on Eve's body. She registered the paralysis the way a person registers a fly landing on their arm, a faint inconvenience, nothing that changed the shape of the next second. I activated the War King's sword wings, the weapon I had forged across 5 million years inside the gate's library. I activated the killing god Exogear in the same breath. Everything I had, everything 200 million subjective years of training had built. I charged. The strike landed on her offered right arm. Her arm did not bend. My weapon did not leave a mark. The chamber's silence after the impact was heavier than the strike had been. I backed off. I came from a different angle. Same result. Her arm caught the strike without effort, without adjustment, without the rest of her body acknowledging that something had hit it. I tried a Grim Arts combo, the same sequence that had closed Nick's serious form. 3 moves that had ended 89 billion existence value in a single breath. Eve caught the combo on the same arm. I poured every reserve into a flash fist, heavier than anything I had ever thrown. The kind of punch that rewrites geography. Eve intercepted it on the same arm and, while holding my fist against her palm, explained to me calmly that the gap between half godhood and true divinity was not a number. It was a world. I was standing on one side. She was standing on the other, and no amount of hitting the wall would move it. I backed off for the last time. My narration went flat. 300 million years of training had given me a wall to throw myself against, and the wall had not noticed. I activated the only trick I had left, the trick that had worked every previous time something had been impossible. I closed my eyes in the middle of a fight and fell into the deepest meditation I had ever attempted. Somewhere inside 300 million years of accumulated effort was the next form. Somewhere inside was the answer to a question the world had not asked yet. I went looking for it. The chamber could wait. Eve could wait. The trillion existence value God, standing across from me with one arm behind her back, could wait, because the alternative was dying without trying. And I had used up my tolerance for that sometime around year 1. Deep in the meditation, I felt it. The same sensation I had felt since my 170th millionth year of training. The feeling of something about to open. A door inside a door. A level past the level. I had chased this feeling for 130 million years, and it had never let me catch it. Eve announced she was bored. The words reached me through the meditation like sound through water. She said she was done watching me despair. She concentrated the aura in her right hand, the hand that had held back everything I had thrown, and the air in the chamber turned white. The spell assembled. I did not need my eyes open to know what it was. The Isekai Canon, named for what it did to dimensions. Existence value of 1 trillion compressed into a single point of annihilation. I felt the cold of imminent death settle on my skin the way frost settles on a window. The kind of cold that does not come from temperature. The kind that comes from the body understanding, before the mind catches up, that the next second might be the last one. I used the fear. I used it the way I had used every other impossible thing the world had handed me, as fuel. 3 billion subjective years I had spent practicing the technique. 3 billion years of failure. Not once had it worked. Not once had the degraded copy of Imagine Breaker that lived inside my skill list done what the original was supposed to do. The success rate was a number so close to 0 that the difference was academic, but 3 billion years of practice had built something underneath the failures. A groove, a channel, a path worn into my soul by 10 million repetitions of the same impossible gesture. And the fear of the Isekai Canon, the absolute certainty that I was about to die, pushed me into that groove the way a river pushes through a canyon it spent 1,000 years carving. I gathered every drop of mana and aura I had into both hands. I concentrated until my vision blacked. I concentrated past the black, into the space behind it, into the place where the technique lived. I said the word, Omega Bastion. The Isekai Canon vanished in front of my palms with a sound like a soap bubble popping. The white light died. The chamber was silent for the 3rd time in this fight. I opened my eyes. Eve, the broken self, was staring at her own hand, confused, genuinely confused, for the first time since the bracelet had landed on the floor. She demanded an explanation. I straightened. I was bleeding. The concentration had cost me something inside my head. My vision kept trying to tunnel, and I was not letting it. I wiped the blood from under my nose with the back of my hand and told her the truth and the lie in the same sentence. Omega Bastion, I said. My last stronghold, a degraded version of Imagine Breaker. It nullifies any attack, physical, magical, dimensional, conceptual, anything. The success rate, I told her, was near certain now that I had pushed past the threshold. The audience deserves to know I had succeeded exactly once. The technique I had just described as near certain was a one-time miracle that had cost me brain damage to perform. The trick to staying alive was convincing the woman with a trillion existence value that the miracle was repeatable. She tested the claim. Her hand rose and she cast Purgatory Light Orb rank 800. Hundreds of orbs of black light materialized in the air above her, dense, fast, arranged in a grid that pulsed like a heartbeat. She told me one nullification was fine. She could cast this spell another 1,000,000 times. I smiled. The same smile, pointed at the thing wearing her face. I can maintain the concentration for 100 million years, I said. Another lie, the biggest one of the night. But it was the lie that bought the next breath, and the breath after that, and the breath after that. And somewhere inside those borrowed breaths was the plan I had not invented yet. The orbs fired. The chamber turned white. I held my hands in front of me and pretended I was not afraid. The orbs came like rain, hundreds of them, each one a black light sphere the size of my fist, each one carrying enough force to erase me from existence. Eve fired them at machine gun pace, and the chamber turned white, with the crossfire of my own nullification clashing against her casting speed. I threw Omega Bastion at everyone, matched the wavelength, collapsed the sphere, moved to the next. Each one cost me something, not mana, not stamina, years. Each nullification pulled from my lifespan, a few seconds of life per orb, and there were hundreds, and she was not slowing down. The War King's sword wings shattered under the stray shots I could not reach. The 100 cursed soldiers I had circling the perimeter went down in a single volley that punched through the gaps. I deactivated the Killing God exogear to funnel everything I had left into the technique. By the time the volley stopped, my hair was white. Not a streak, not a patch at the temples. White. My hands were shaking. I was bleeding from my ears and the corners of my eyes. I caught my reflection in a fragment of the chamber wall that still held a polish, and I looked 90 years old. The boy who walked into this labyrinth was gone. The thing standing in his place was barely standing at all. I told Eve I would never stop until I had finished saving her. My voice cracked on the word saving. It came out like something scraped from the bottom of a jar. Her broken self paused. For half a breath, less, something crossed her face that was not contempt. It was small and it was fast, and it disappeared the moment she recognized it. Fear. She called me disgusting. She began casting the next volley. Before the casting finished, the gate spoke inside my head. Daily entry. Mandatory. The labyrinth dissolved around me like chalk in water, and I was on the floor of the healing chamber, white-haired, bleeding, staring at a ceiling I had stared at for more lifetimes than any sane person should be able to count. The treatment capsule did its work. The white drained out of my hair. The bleeding stopped. The years came back. My body was 17 again, and the memory of being 90 was already fading into the place where the gate keeps the things it takes from you. I lay in the capsule for a few seconds longer than I needed to. Not because my body was still damaged, because my hands were still shaking, and for the first time in a very long time, I could not make them stop by telling them to. Every orb I had nullified was still playing back behind my eyes. The black light pulse, the wavelength match, the cost. I had paid for each one in time I would never get back, and she had hundreds more where those came from. The gate informed me, in the same flat voice it always used, that my Omega Bastion had successfully nullified rank 500 plus magic. A new room was unlocked, the Omega Room, the first expansion the gate had offered in billions of years. I walked in. I read the manual on the pedestal by the door. The room trained the applications of Omega Bastion through an NPC instructor designed to kill the trainee repeatedly. The room would rebuild the trainee after each death. The cycle would continue until the trainee learned, or until the trainee chose to leave. The instructor was already waiting. He introduced himself as Omega. He moved once. The hit landed. I went down. The room rebuilt me. He hit me again. I went down again. The room rebuilt me again. A billion years of that. I will not describe it. The source of the memory is still in me somewhere, and when I reach for it, I find only the shape, the cycle, the floor, the sound of my own body failing, the light resetting, the instructor who never changed expression, the strike I could not learn to read in time. A billion subjective years of being struck down and rebuilt by a thing that did not care whether I understood what it was teaching. I did not understand. Not for the first 800 million. Not for the next 190 million. In the last 10 million, something opened inside me, and the instructor, for the first time, did not connect clean. I could not name what had opened. The narration of my own life declined to give it a word, but the quality of the air around me changed when I walked out of the room, and I knew it because Eve noticed it before I did. I came back to the chamber half a second after the gate had pulled me in. Eve had just finished casting the second volley. Her arm was still raised. The orbs had not launched yet. My hair was black. My body was 17, and something inside me was different. Eve noticed. Her broken self tilted her head and observed that my aura had changed quality. She asked, with the mild curiosity of someone noting a new cloud formation, whether I had gotten stronger. I told her I had spent 1,000,000,000 years being killed by an instructor named Omega. I told her I had learned nothing useful. I told her that the only result of the experience was that something had opened. She accepted that with a nod and readied the second volley. And I, standing there with something open inside me that had been closed for 300 million years of prior training, got to work. I stacked everything I had left. Divine transformation first. The deep light came up through my core and settled into my limbs. Then the iron spirit call with the vow of exposure modifier, the buff that maximized everything at the cost of being, as the system helpfully noted, terribly uncool. True armed fighting spirit pushed to tier 5. The cursed soldier's attack power transfer rider fed whatever the dead soldiers had been carrying into my own reserves. The War King's sword wings redeployed from their fragments. The killing god Exogear with its Aria Gaius modifications. Magic and defense sacrificed for offense. Nick, still perched on my head through all of it, observed dryly that I was doing the thing where I stacked every buff at once, like a child dumping every ingredient into a pot. By the time the stack up finished, my temporary maximum had climbed to almost 700 billion existence value. Eve ran the math aloud. She calculated it would take her about 8,000 strikes to put me down. She scoffed at the effort. Then she did something I was counting on. She offered, with the kind of theatrical generosity her broken self specialized in, to stand defenseless and take one hit as a memento. I agreed. The buffs were not the weapon. The buffs were the noise. Inside the noise, the real attack was running. The wavelength matching application of Omega Bastion I had opened in the last 10 million years of the room. Eve's defense system was keyed to a specific magical wavelength. I could match it. I could nullify the system at the point of contact. Every reserve I had built was theater to make the real strike invisible. The target was the bracelet. I believed, based on everything the good Eve had implied, everything the broken Eve's behavior had confirmed, that destroying the bracelet would release the seal and bring the real Eve back. I poured every reserve into a dragon flash crushing fist aimed at her left wrist. The buffs made the strike deafening. The Omega Bastion application underneath passed through Eve's defenses like they were not there. The bracelet shattered. So did everything else. The wavelength match had been too clean. I had aimed for the bracelet, and the nullification had disintegrated everything around it. Eve's body, her arms, her torso, her wings, her horns, everything that had been standing a meter in front of me was gone. The force of the attack had unmade her at the structural level. The chamber was full of settling particles that might have been dust and might have been something worse. I panicked, out loud. I promised I would learn resurrection magic. I promised I would bring her back. I was apologizing to the empty air in front of me when Eve's body began to reform. It came back in pieces. First the outline, then the density, then the features. Seconds. She reformed the way water fills a glass, from the bottom up, and by the time she was standing again, she looked exactly as she had before I hit her, minus the bracelet. Her broken self mentioned, with the same calm she used for everything, that she possessed the platinum special called Infinite Resurrection, the highest possible rank of resurrection ability, far above my indomitable soul, which she was kind enough to note was the lowest class. The bracelet, she confirmed, was destroyed. She thanked me. The bracelet had been the cage on her broken self, not the seal restraining the monster. The cage keeping the monster from using everything she had. I had spent 1 billion years training for a strike designed to free the real Eve, and instead, I had freed the thing living inside her. Her thank you was sincere. That was the worst part. I had done everything right. I had read the evidence. I had built the misdirection layer by layer. I had aimed for the bracelet, and only the bracelet and the Omega Bastion application had landed exactly where I pointed it. Every step of the plan had worked, and the plan had been wrong from the start, not because I was stupid, not because I was reckless, but because the information I was building on had a hole in it the size of the distinction between a seal and a cage. The good Eve had never told me which direction the bracelet worked. She could not have. She had one breath and she used it to beg me to kill her. I had been the hero. I had freed the monster. Eve announced, with the satisfaction of an artist completing a piece, that she would show me her real form. A thank you for the performance. The transformation was not physical in the way the beast mode had been. There were no new horns, no new wings. The light around her simply reorganized. It bent toward her body and then pushed outward from from it in a wave that made the chamber walls hum. When the light settled, she was standing in the same place, in the same posture, and she had somehow become more radiant in a way that had nothing to do with beauty and everything to do with scale. The aura was no longer contained. It spilled across the floor like fog, reached the walls, climbed them. She dropped the fake aura so my property eye could see what was underneath. The number, when my vision parsed it, was 19 trillion. I had spent everything on the bracelet strike. My temporary maximum was sitting at about 500. The gap was no longer a ratio. It was not a number a brain could hold. It was the distance between a candle flame and a star, measured in a unit that only one of them could read. Eve noted the math. She asked, dryly, how I intended to help her now. Behind the safety barrier, Diana moved. I heard it before I saw it. The dimensional lock that was supposed to hold her in place crackled and gave. She had pushed it open, not broken it, pushed, the way you push open a door that was never really locked against you. She was the chamber's stakeholder. The lock had never been designed to stop her if she decided to walk through. She crossed the gap. She stopped beside me. She looked at Eve's radiant form with the same resigned calm she had used when she first told me she was planning to die. She said, in the baby talk register, I had not heard from her in a long time, that I should have ended the girl ages ago and spared everyone the trouble. She made a small dark joke about the two of us dying together and exchanging an indirect kiss in the afterlife. I heard it. I heard the joke. I heard the baby talk and the resignation and the permission she was giving herself to stop trying. It was not over yet because I was still here. I said the line out loud to her, to Eve, to the chamber, to whatever was listening. I told Diana, sharply, the sharpest my voice had been all phase, to get back behind the barrier and stay there until I had saved Eve. I told her she was not allowed to die for me, not today, not for the world, not for anything. Diana did not obey. She looked at me the way she always looked at me when I gave her an order she had already decided to refuse. She walked behind me instead, because that was where she had decided she would stand. I charged Eve before I could argue with Diana about it. Every strike I threw was disciplined, not the desperation of a man trying to win, but the focus of a man trying to understand. I was reading Eve's Marshall system, cataloging the movement, looking for the architecture underneath the power. If I could find the shape, I could find the flaw. And if I could find the flaw, I could end this without killing the host. Eve dodged every strike with the small flick of the wrist energy of an adult playing tag with a toddler. She mocked the math one more time. 500 against 19 trillion. She waited for me to tire. I did not tire, but the math did not care about willpower, and the gap did not close. And Diana was standing behind me in a place I had told her not to be. I could feel her there, not with any skill, not with the property eye. I could feel her the way you feel someone watching you across a room. The weight of attention, the small specific gravity of a person who has decided they will not leave. She had made the decision. I could hear it in the silence behind me. And the thing I would not admit, the thing I shoved down below every tactical calculation I was running, was that the geometry of the fight had changed. I was between Eve and Diana. The cannon could fire again at any time. If I moved wrong, the line of fire behind me was not empty anymore. Eve landed 2 clean strikes. The first was a punch that carried the weight of 1,000 existence value behind it. My body folded around the impact, and I went backward 3 steps before my legs remembered what standing was. The second was a kick to my center that dropped me to one knee. My vision rolled. The chamber tilted. I could feel things inside my chest that were not in the right places anymore. I started pushing myself up because that was what my 100 million years had left me capable of. The floor under my hands was cracked from where my knee had hit it. My arms were shaking. I was halfway to standing when Eve decided the demonstration was over. She raised one hand and assembled the dimensional cannon. I recognized it. The same geometry of gathered light, the same deep violet charge, the same sound like the air being torn open from the inside. The last time she had fired it, my first Omega Bastion had popped it out of existence. This time, my reserves were empty. I had nothing left to cancel it with. I thought of Diana behind me, and the thought was not a thought. It was a sound, a single high note at the back of my skull that said, "Move her," and I could not move her because I could not move myself because my knee was still on the ground, and half a second was not enough time to do 2 things. The cannon fired. The beam crossed the chamber. I was mid-rise, one knee still on the ground, half a second from standing, half a second left. In that half second, the world slowed to a single visible action. Diana, behind me, ran 3 steps. She tackled me sideways. Her shoulder hit my ribs, and my body was moving out of the beam's path before my brain had caught up with what was happening. The ground came up at an angle I had not chosen. My back hit the floor. Her weight was on top of me for a fraction of a second, and then it was not. The beam continued straight through the space I had been standing in. Diana was standing there instead. The beam passed through. The chamber went quiet. Not silent, quiet in the way a room goes quiet when something that was in it a moment ago is no longer in it, and the air has not yet decided how to fill the space. The smell of the chamber was ozone and old stone and nothing else. In the space where Diana had been standing half a second ago, there was nothing. Not a body, not a mark, not a trace. The safety barrier was still standing on the far side of the chamber like a backdrop nobody was watching. The floor where she had been was the same floor. The air where she had been was the same air. She was not there. And her voice, in the half second before the beam, on the way to the floor, with me, between the tackle and the light, had said 2 words. Bye-bye. The beam hit the chamber wall and dissipated. The violet light faded. The hum stopped. Eve stood at the other end of the room, radiant, 19 trillion, looking at the space where her cannon had passed through with the mild interest of someone who had aimed at one target and hit another. I was on the floor. I was looking at the space where Diana had been. Something inside me came loose. I will not tell you what it was. The narration of my own life reaches for the word and finds only the feeling, a fastening, somewhere behind my ribs, somewhere in the architecture of the thing that had held me together across 100 million years of solitude. And the fastening was no longer fastened. It had not broken. It had not snapped. It had come loose the way a knot comes loose when the rope finally remembers that it was never meant to be tied that way. The voice you have been hearing, my voice, began to come apart. Not loud, not screaming. The opposite. The sentences shortened. The humor that had been my armor since I was a child, alone in a room full of years, was not there anymore. I reached for it. The shelf where I kept it was empty. I was on the floor of the chamber. Eve was at the other end of it. The cannon's afterimage was fading from the wall. The air where Diana had stood smelled like nothing at all. She had called me a cockroach the first time I walked into her house. She had planned to die before I ever showed up. She had insulted me, pushed me away, told me I was not worth the effort of keeping alive. And in the last half second of her life, she had run 3 steps and put her body between mine and the thing that would end me. 2 words, not a speech, not a confession, not even a goodbye. Just the sound a person makes when they have already let go of everything they were holding, and the only thing left is the shape of a farewell small enough to carry. I was still here. She was not. The floor was cold. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the silence, not the space where she had been standing. The floor. It was cold against my palms and my knees, and the side of my face where I had landed. And it was the kind of cold that does not warm no matter how long a body lies on it. I was still on the floor. I was still here. She was not. The voice in my head, the one that belongs to the gate, the one that has narrated every contract and every curse and every impossible offer since the day I walked through the door, cut the silence like a clerk reading a verdict. It announced formally that Diana Soulwing had died. Existence value reduced to 0. Soul status unclaimed. Unclaimed. The word landed somewhere inside the wreckage of whatever my mind had become in the last 5 seconds. Unclaimed meant the world's reclamation system had not yet absorbed her. Unclaimed meant the soul was still in the air. Unclaimed meant resurrection was mechanically possible if I had a method, a vessel, and enough power to force the transfer before the reclamation timer ran out. I did not have the power. I had nothing. My buffs were spent, my reserves were at 0, and my temporary existence value was somewhere around 500 against the woman standing at the other end of the chamber at 19 trillion. The gate offered me a choice. Close the nightmare soul gate forever, walk away, lose every advantage the gate had ever given me, live a normal life without the daily curse, or upgrade. 10 billion year mode, a harder contract, a deeper hell. The price of entry, immediate settlement of 3.6 billion years of accumulated debt from every session I had ever used. I said yes before the offer finished. The debt settled inside one breath of real time. 3.6 billion subjective years of training compressed into the space between my heartbeat and the next. I fought a CPU copy of Eve, the same stats, the same 19 trillion, the same movement set, 593,725,320 times across those years. I won 19,838 of them. The rest I lost. I lost for 3 billion years. I won for the last few hundred million. By the end, I could fight her blindfolded. The breath ended. I opened my eyes. My hair was black again. My body was whole. My mind was no longer fracturing. The fragments had realigned around something I could not name. Something that had opened inside the Omega Room a billion years ago and had been waiting for this exact shape of grief to finish blooming. I stood up. Eve, the broken self, the curse wearing her body, registered the change from across the chamber. She tilted her head. She asked in a voice that sounded more curious than threatened what had happened to me. I did not answer. I was looking at the air above the spot where Diana had been standing. The soul was there, faint, unclaimed, beautiful in a way I had no intention of describing to anyone, ever. Eve fired a dimensional cannon at me, the same weapon that had erased Diana. I caught it with one hand, the way a person swats a fly, and let the energy scatter against the far wall. The chamber shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The math had changed. My first move was a kick aimed at her head. Not a wild kick, not a desperate one. The kind of kick a person throws when they have memorized the target's movement so completely that the dodge pattern is a formality. She tried to step left. I was already there. The kick connected. She stumbled. It was the first time in the entire fight that Eve had stumbled. "I trained on you," I said. The words were flat, conversational, the tone of a man explaining a receipt. I kicked her again. This one, she blocked. The block did not stop the kick. She skidded backward along the chamber floor, her golden white aura flaring like a candle in a draft. I explained the math while I advanced. 593 million fights, 19,000 wins, 1 billion years just to start seeing patterns, 2 billion to reach parity, 3.5 billion to win without taking damage. I delivered the numbers the way a clerk reads a ledger, deadpan, footnoted, absurd. Eve tried another cannon. I stepped through it. The beam parted around me like water around a stone. She tried a physical combination, 3 strikes aimed at center mass. I read all 3 before they launched and returned a single counter that sent her into the far wall. I was not trying to kill her. I was not even trying to hurt her. Every strike I landed was calibrated, aimed at the cursed parts of her body, the places where the calamity's signature burned brightest in her aura, leaving the original Eve intact underneath. Cancer surgery at trillion-tier scale. The precision was a vow I had made to myself somewhere around year 2 billion of the debt, when I realized that the woman I was fighting was not the woman I was trying to save. Eve mocked the precision. She called it sentimental, mid-mockery. Her expression shifted. The realization that I was reading her in real time, that every feint she had ever learned was a pattern I had already cataloged across 3 billion years of repetition. The system still called me level 1. My existence value read 3,000 billion. My combat rating was a string of stars too long to display. The level had not changed. The level would never change. I kicked her again. She did not block this one. The curse inside her made its last bet. The red aura flooded the chamber like something had ruptured behind reality. Eve's body straightened. Her voice changed, deeper, older, a register that did not belong to a woman in her late teens. She announced the activation of the Aria Gaius of compressed lifespan, every limiter removed, every reserve of remaining life converted into power, now all of it in one sustained burst. She transformed. The golden white radiance of ultimate perfect body was gone. In its place, red, the perfect ultimate evil god, she called herself. And the title was not empty. The aura was crushing. The walls cracked. The floor beneath her feet cratered. She hit me. I did not dodge in time. The blow found my chest and drove me backward into the chamber wall hard enough to leave an imprint. Before I could peel myself free, the next strike came. then the next, a sustained combination that lasted the better part of a minute. My body took every hit. The narration does not linger on the specifics. I was outpaced, outpowered, and I could feel the gap between her new ceiling and my current maximum with every impact. On the floor, again, the red aura above me like weather. I asked her, from the floor, why she had kept fighting the 19 trillion CPU even after she had won. Why keep pushing against a ceiling that was already below her? Then I told her the answer. 19 trillion was the cap. The CPU rooms could not generate an opponent above that threshold. Every fight I had ever trained against inside the gate had been bounded by that number. The wall was not biological, it was mechanical. I could not break through it alone because there was nothing on the other side of it for me to push against. I thanked her, calmly, for exceeding the cap with her last resort form, for being the first real opponent in my entire existence to push me past the ceiling the gate had built. My body began to glow. This is the part of the story where the prose changes. Not because I want it to, because the experience demands it. There was a billion years inside the gate's library, a billion years of sitting in a room full of forbidden text, searching for the shape of what had opened inside me in the Omega room, tracing the outline of a form that existed just past the edge of what the system's numbers could measure. Halfway through those years, in a room that smelled like dust and silence and nothing else, Diana's face surfaced in my memory. The same anchor, the same face, the same expression, the one she wore the night she told me she was going to die for the world, and I told her no. Strange divine characters danced in the air around me. They wrote themselves into existence, symbols I had never seen in any language, in any world. They circled my body like a liturgy. The glow was not heat. It was not light in the way that fires produce light. It was the accumulated weight of every experience I had ever survived, converting itself into something the world's measurement system was not built to contain. A crystalline radiance that did not come from the body, but from the structure underneath. The form landed. Flash godification. The name wrote itself across the air the same way the divine characters had, not chosen by me, not chosen by the system, arrived the way a name arrives when the thing it describes has been waiting long enough to be called. Scattering flash. The status screen updated because the system is mechanical and does not know when to be silent. Level 1, existence value, 5 trillion. Combat rating, a string of stars too long to print. I stood up from the floor and the red aura in the chamber recoiled from my skin the way darkness recoils from a window being opened. Eve's expression had changed. The mockery was gone. The curiosity was gone. What remained was something I had seen exactly once before, in a different face, in a different room. The look a creature gives when it realizes the thing in front of it is no longer the same species. The trillion-tier cap was no longer a cap. The wall was behind me, and the girl whose soul was still floating in the air above the empty space on the chamber floor, the girl who had said bye-bye and meant it, was waiting for me to finish this so I could bring her home. I closed the gap in one motion. The strike was a reverse breath flash punch. The narration describes it through the rhythm rather than the impact. The air compressed, the sound arrived late, and the cursed Eve bent double in front of me like a hinge folding shut. She coughed. What came out was not blood. It was dark residue, the color of the calamity that had lived inside her since before the story began, now visible, now separating from the body it had parasitized. The red aura of compressed lifespan absolute despair dissipated. The chamber exhaled. The cursed self insisted through gritted teeth that she and the calamity were one, that they could not be separated, that what lived inside Eve was Eve now, and there was no version of the host that existed independently of the disease. I disagreed. I told her, dryly, that I was raised by a family that decided to erase me before my teens, that the Cross family had looked at a boy who could not level up and decided the most efficient response was to remove his name from the bloodline and pretend he had never existed, that I had spent 100 million years alone with nothing but that memory and a door, and the memory had not consumed me, and the door had not broken me, and if the worst thing my own family could do could not turn me into something unrecognizable, then a calamity born from someone else's despair did not stand a chance. I challenged it. Come in, try. The transfer happened in a single gesture. I reached into the space between Eve's aura and the calamity signature and pulled. The dark residue left her body in a stream, visible, tangible, wrong, and entered my chest cavity the way smoke enters a room when someone opens a window. The calamity, now inside me, tried to consume my potential. It tried to find the structure of my soul and disassemble it. It tried to turn me into a vessel of absolute despair, the way it had turned Eve into the 1 trillion enemy the world had been afraid of. It found, instead, a structural weirdness that did not metabolize correctly. 100 million years of solitude, 100 billion years of training, a mind fractured and rebuilt so many times that the architecture no longer matched any template the calamity had ever encountered. The calamity inside my body vomited. I told it out loud in the middle of the chamber with the dignity of a man scolding a cat that had knocked over a glass, to behave itself and to stop making a mess of my chest cavity. The calamity, in apparent shock, complied. Eve blinked. The original Eve, the real one, the woman who had arrived at Diana's mansion in a crimson tunic and asked to become my jewel, the woman who had made me tea and cleaned the hallways and cried into my shoulder under a tree in the forest. She was back. Her eyes were amber again. Her aura was hers. The body that had been ultimate perfect body mode was the woman in the crimson tunic and combat boots. She looked at me. She looked at her own hands. She looked at me again. She dropped to her knees and tried to apologize for everything, for the cannon, for the destruction, for the body that had been used as a weapon against the person she wanted to protect. I told her to hold the apology. I was not done yet. I healed her first. High-tier recovery magic. The kind I had learned somewhere around year 8 billion in a library the gate keeps locked for spirits it does not trust to be responsible with the knowledge. The magic passed through Eve's body and repaired what the calamity had broken: muscle, bone, the pathways the curse had eaten through. She knelt in front of me with tears running down her face, and I let the magic work until the last trace of structural damage was gone. Then I reached into my inventory and pulled out the vessel, a softly glowing sphere the size of a softball. I had built it quietly, across the weeks before the final fight, planning for the possibility that I could not prevent what was coming. The vessel was not a weapon. It was a container, a body waiting for a soul. I looked up. Diana's soul was still in the air above the empty space where she had been standing, faint, warm. The dimensional cannon had erased her body, but the soul had stayed. The weapon was dimensional, and the soul existed in a layer the cannon could not reach. I guided the soul into the vessel, gently, the way a person carries something they have been afraid of dropping for longer than the world has existed. The vessel expanded in my hand. The glow shifted from abstract to specific, from light to form. The sphere became shoulders. The shoulders became a body. The body became her. The same hair, emerald blonde, the bob that stopped at her jawline, the same skin, the same face, the same closed eyes that I had been looking at in memory for 10 billion years of compressed time and would recognize in any room, in any world, at any distance. Diana opened her eyes, green, almond-shaped, slightly downturned at the outer corners, looking at me the way a person looks at the first thing they see after waking from the longest sleep of their life. She blinked. She looked at the chamber. She looked at me. She said, in a voice that was smaller than any voice I had ever heard her use, smaller than the contempt, smaller than the insults, smaller than the night she told me she was going to die, that it seemed to have been a resurrection, and that apparently I could do anything. I held her against my chest the way I had held her the night in the mansion when she had finally stopped pretending she did not want someone to hold her. My arms around her back, her head against my shoulder, the crystalline glow from the flash godification form casting light across the chamber floor like something the dark had been waiting for. I apologized for failing to protect her, for being protected by her, again, the way I had been protected by her a year before the story started, when she had saved a small lost version of me in a way I still called twisted. For the half second, I was too slow to catch the cannon, for the fact that the strongest being in the world had not been strong enough to keep her safe, Diana turned her face away from me. The same gesture, chin turned, eyes averted. The performance of indifference she had been running since the day I walked into her bath and told her I was there to marry her. She said she had not intended to save me, that she had just tripped. The same phrase, the same register, the same baby talk deflection she had used the first time I met her after the mansion, when I had asked her why she helped me a year ago, and she had denied it with exactly this voice. I just tripped. I did not help you. I was just annoyed. The words had not changed. Everything behind them had. I smiled. The first real smile since this fight began. The kind that uses the whole face and does not care who sees it. Eve was still on her knees beside us. She had been watching. Her face was a ruin of tears and gratitude, and something I did not have a word for. The expression of a woman who had just watched the boy she followed put a soul back into a body with his bare hands. She tried one more time to apologize for the canon, for Diana, for everything the cursed self had done. I looked at her. I used the same smile. I told her that I understood, that she had just tripped. The phrase landed different the second time, not as denial, as grace, as the precise mechanism Diana had invented, refusing to accept the apology because accepting it would mean acknowledging that the person apologizing had done something wrong, and the person apologizing had not done anything wrong, and the boy standing in front of her knew it. Diana, in my arms, heard me say it to Eve. I felt her body shake once against my chest, a laugh or a sob, or something the language does not separate cleanly. 3 words, said 3 times across the story, landing different every time. The chamber held the moment. Eve on her knees, tears still running. Diana against my chest, alive. The performance of indifference already failing. Nick on my head, silent through the entire phase, the longest stretch of quiet he had managed in the entire video. The 4 of us, together, in the geometry of the mansion days, restored in the worst place I had ever known. Then the gate spoke. The voice cut through the stillness the way it always does, bureaucratic, formal, indifferent to the weight of the moment it was interrupting. It congratulated me on defeating the ultimate perfect body Eve Crimson. It noted the successful transfer of the calamity entity. It recorded the activation of flash godification. It updated my file. Then, in the same breath, with the same clerical tone, it announced the next item on the schedule. In 1 week, 7 real-time days, 10,000 enemies would arrive through the deep door, each one carrying an existence value of 500 trillion. Classification, B, 500 trillion, each 10,000 of them. I did the math in the same heartbeat I received the number. 500 trillion was 100 times my current 5 trillion. 10,000 of them meant the total threat was 5 quadrillion, a number the system did not have a display format for. In 1 week, Nick on my head spoke for the first time in the entire phase. 1 short line, delivered in the cheerful deadpan of a creature who had watched 1,000 worlds end and found exactly 2 of them funny. He observed that the universe appeared to be, as a matter of structural policy, allergic to letting me have nice things. I did not put Diana down. I did not stop smiling. The next mountain was already on the calendar. The girl in my arms was alive. The girl on her knees in front of me was free. The parasite in my chest had been told to behave, and so far it was listening. Level 1, 5 trillion existence value, 10,000 enemies at 500 trillion each in 7 days. The announcement hung in the air. Eve was crying softly. Diana's breathing was steady against my shoulder. I held her a little tighter, and I did not look away from the dark. The gate spoke the morning after I saved everything. It did not congratulate me again. It had already done that once, and the gate was not the type to repeat itself. Instead, it delivered what I can only describe as a tax audit wrapped in a death threat. 2 paths, it said. Path 1, kill Diana and Eve. If both of them die, the B threat does not manifest. 10,000 enemies at 500 trillion existence value each, erased from the calendar, and all it costs is the 2 people I had just spent 10 billion years bringing back. I said no before the sentence finished. The gate moved on without comment, the way a clerk moves on when you decline the extended warranty. Path 2, then, 7 conditions. Meet them in the real world within the week, and the facilities I need to survive B unlock 1 by 1. Fail, and the facilities stay locked, and I fight 5 quintillion combined existence value with whatever I have in my pockets. I asked for the list. Condition 1, Become a registered adventurer. My rank in the guild raises the gate's internal processing cap, which raises the ceiling on everything I can train against. Condition 2, receive a special medal from the Emperor. Every medal scales every facility's output. Condition 3, accumulate wealth. Same scaling mechanic, tied to total assets. Condition 4, judge criminals. Unlock something called the Judgment Jail, a platinum tier special that grows the more I use it. Condition 5, form the strongest secret society in the world. Unlocks the secret room. Condition 6, lose my virginity. Unlocks the harem room. I paused on that one. The gate, with the deadpan precision of an accountant reading a line item, noted that I had made 0 progress on condition 6 across 100 million subjective years of existence. I told it that was a scheduling issue, not a capability issue. It said nothing. I moved on. Condition 7, do not disrupt the world's existing power balance. 3 modification slots for every facility, contingent on keeping the surface world's political order intact. A thick rulebook materialized in my lap. I looked at it. It was the size of a dictionary. The gate warned me that all conditions had to be met legitimately. No threatening kings, no intimidating guild officials into handing me medals, no shortcuts. I filed one more thing, the deferred time doubles rule. If I skipped a daily session, the next one doubled. Skip 2 days, it quadrupled. Skip the full week, and the final session would compress 140 billion years into a single entry. I did not plan to use that yet, but I wrote the math on the back wall of my mind, where I keep things I might need when everything else has failed. Diana watched me read. Eve stood behind her, hands folded. Neither of them said a word about being the gate's suggested shortcut. I did not look up from the rulebook. I sat on an overturned trash can in a back alley, 3 blocks from the Imperial Quarter, and waited. Catherine Cross arrived 5 minutes late, with the posture of someone who had been running for days, and the expression of someone who would stab the next person to mention it. Late teens, dark hair cut for function, eyes that evaluated everything they landed on and liked almost none of it. She was my blood relative in the Cross family's branching structure, raised under the same code, and currently wanted dead for stabbing the family's senior council representative over a hierarchy dispute she had decided to settle with a blade instead of a petition. She looked at the trash can I was sitting on. She looked at me. You picked a romantic spot. I told her I appreciated atmosphere. She asked what I wanted. I told her to contract with me and become an adventurer. The pitch was simple. She would be the public face of a 2-person team. Every achievement, every rank promotion, every accolade the guild dispensed would go under her name. I would operate behind the scenes. She would get credit. I would get the condition progress the gate required. The reason was structural. My story, told honestly, would break public reality. A permanent level 1 dropout rising to the top of the adventurer rankings in a week would trigger every investigative authority the Empire maintained. Her story, on the other hand, was plausible. A genius from the Cross family's combat branch going independent after a falling out. The guild would buy that. The Empire would buy that. Nobody would look twice. I offered her protection from the family, leverage against anyone who came after her, and one wish of her choosing when the contract was done. Catherine listened with her arms crossed and her weight on her back foot, the stance of a person ready to leave at any moment. You are completely insane, she said. She was mid-rejection when the alley behind us went very quiet. The specific kind of quiet that happens when a professional enters a space and the air itself decides to hold still. Sebastian Cross stepped out of the shadow at the back of the alley with an executioner's grace. He was our elder brother in the Cross hierarchy, mid-20s, the family's top-ranked active operative. He moved the way people move when every step has been rehearsed 10,000 times, and the rehearsal included killing whoever was at the end of the hallway. He addressed Catherine first. The family, he informed her in the tone of a man reading a verdict, had voted on her execution. He offered her a choice of method. He did not offer her a third option. I stepped between them. Sebastian looked at me the way a surgeon looks at a piece of lint that has landed on the operating table. He asked who I was. Not rhetorically. He genuinely did not recognize me. I had not registered as a person worth remembering. Catherine told him my name. Sebastian's expression shifted by exactly 1 degree. He remembered me now, the trash. the stain, the boy whose level never moved. He told me to step aside with the patience of a man explaining gravity to a child. I did not step aside. Sebastian drew his knife. The strike was fast enough that a normal human eye would have seen nothing but a blur aimed at my neck. He was a professional. The technique was clean. The blade touched my skin and stopped. Not slowed, not deflected. Stopped, the way a thrown stone stops when it hits a mountain. Sebastian pushed. He leaned his weight into it. He activated buff magic and pushed with everything his body and his training and his 60 years of professional killing had given him. The knife did not move. I asked him, quietly, to calm down. His hands were shaking. Sweat had appeared on his forehead in the time it takes to blink. The knife, which had ended careers and closed contracts across 3 countries, was pressed against my neck like a butter knife against a steel door. I crushed it, not with my hands. A thread of aura, barely visible, pinched the blade at its center and snapped it. The 2 halves fell to the alley floor and rang against the stone. Sebastian's worldview cracked in the silence that followed. I could see it happen. The architecture of everything he believed about rank, about levels, about the family code's ability to sort the world into useful and useless, all of it folded inward behind his eyes. He tried to speak. What came out was closer to a breath than a word. I gave him the same offer I had given our father. Be an ally or be erased. The terms were specific. He would return to the family leadership tonight and personally lobby for Catherine's departure to be reclassified from fugitive flight to honorable separation. Catherine would walk free. The family would pretend this alley never existed, and Sebastian would forget he ever saw me here. He agreed, instantly, with the polite formality of a man who has just discovered that the thing standing in front of him has been in his blind spot for a year and could have ended him at any point without raising its voice. I released the pressure. Sebastian left the alley on his own legs, which I considered a kindness. Catherine had not moved from where she had been standing. Her arms were no longer crossed. Her weight was no longer on her back foot. She was staring at the place where Sebastian's knife had been, and then she was staring at me, and the calculation behind her eyes had changed completely. "Deal," she said. I held out my open hand. She took it. The Adventurers Guild smelled like old leather and bad decisions, which I respected. I announced us at the front counter. Team Cross Nova, 2 members. Catherine Cross, combat lead. Adrian Cross, support. The receptionist, a woman named Eliel, with the expression of someone who had heard every lie adventurers could tell and was tired of all of them, looked at Nick sitting on my head and asked if the slime was tamed. I told her it was an ancient god slime with 8.9 billion combat power, and that I could also summon a cursed soldier above god level, and that if she wanted, I could demonstrate either one right now in the lobby. Eliel told me I was the worst kind of adventurer she had ever processed. She told me tamers who relied on a single slime were bottom tier. She told me I was wasting her afternoon. A senior adventurer at the bar who had been watching Eliel the way a dog watches a steak stood up and offered to teach me some manners on her behalf. Catherine, whom I had asked to be modest, used a non-lethal finger strike that dropped him to his knees before he finished the sentence. He stayed there, gasping, arms locked at his sides. "That was modest?" I asked her. She shrugged. "He is not unconscious." The guildmaster arrived before the situation could escalate further. Raksai, older, calm. The kind of calm that comes from having seen enough violence that new violence is mostly a scheduling problem. He used communication magic to contact the Cross family directly, and Sebastian's lobbying, executed in real time during that call, confirmed what I needed. Catherine Cross had been reclassified as honorably departed. No fugitive flag, no execution order, clean. Raksai accepted our registration, but made it clear that no special treatment was coming. 1 star, bottom rung, rank earned through verified accomplishments, not through family name or combat demonstrations in his lobby. I asked for the highest ranked mission a 1-star team was permitted to take. Raksai offered bandit hunting. Clear 2 groups with bounties exceeding 1 million TEs each, and the team earns a promotion to 3 stars. I counter-offered. We would clear 20 groups tonight and expected 5 stars by morning. Roxai stared at me for a long time. Then he agreed, because the alternative was arguing with someone who had just had a senior adventurer folded in half by his partner's index finger. I dropped Catherine at the villa on the way out. Eve met us at the door in her maid uniform, greeted Catherine with a short formal bow, and introduced herself as the household attendant of the Supreme Lord, which was a title I had never approved and could not seem to kill. Catherine looked at Eve, looked at Diana sitting in the corner with a cup of tea, looked at the villa's modest furnishings, and then looked at me with an expression that said she was reconsidering every assumption she had made about my operation. I told her to spend the week here, watch, observe. Words would not explain what she had signed up for. Diana, without looking up from her tea, told Catherine that words would indeed not explain him. It was the first full sentence Diana had spoken in my presence since the revival, and she delivered it with the old register intact. The contempt, the precision, the faintest edge of something underneath that was not contempt at all. I did not comment on it. I left before anyone could see what that sentence did to my chest. I teleported to the eastern forest and stood at the edge of the tree line with the sun going down behind me. Detection magic rolled outward from my feet like a pulse. Every living signature within range lit up in my mind. Bandit camps scattered across the forest floor like dots on a dirty map, most of them clustered around trade roads. A few deeper in, dug into caves and ravines where Imperial patrols would not bother looking. The strongest individual signature registered existence value 362, stronger than my father, stronger than anyone the guild had on its active roster, probably. I filed the question of why someone that strong would waste his life robbing merchants and moved on. The gate's instructions, delivered alongside the detection results, recommended starting with the most dangerous camp first, right branch, high-value targets, efficient progression. I chose left, weakest camp, lowest value, because the gate said right, and I had spent 100 million years being told what to do by a voice in the dark, and choosing left when the instructions said right was the smallest, dumbest, most human act of rebellion I could manage, and I was not ready to give that up yet. Nick, from the top of my head, asked if there was a strategic reason for going left. No, I said. He settled deeper into my hair and said nothing else. Somewhere ahead of me, the weakest bandit camp in the eastern forest was about to have the worst night of its existence, and it did not know it yet, and I was smiling as I walked into the trees. I found the Blood Sword Brigade exactly where the detection magic said they would be. 23 of them, arranged around a campfire that had burned down to coals, their weapons stacked against the trees like they expected the world to wait. The first bandit lunged from behind a tree before I finished counting heads. I caught his wrist mid-swing, applied aura in a concentrated pulse from the hip down, and watched his legs stop answering. He hit the dirt face first without understanding what had happened. The second came from the left, same result. The third tried to scream for backup. I paralyzed him before the sound finished forming. 3 minutes and 20 seconds to put every member of the Blood Sword Brigade on the ground, conscious, alive, and unable to feel anything below the waist. Their weapons lay where they had dropped them. Their mouths still worked. I stood in the center of the clearing and looked at the circle of bodies around me. "You are credited," I said, "with the kind of crimes that justify your name." Nobody answered. They were too busy trying to process the fact that a teenager had just ended their operation without drawing a weapon. "I am not going to kill you." I crouched in front of the one who looked like the leader. "Killing you would be too fast. You are going to be processed through the Imperial courts. You are going to be sentenced legitimately, and you are going to spend the next decade learning the precise proportion between what you did and what happens next." He tried to spit at me. It landed on his own chin. I stood up. Nick sat on my head, quiet. He knew when the comedy was in the silence. By midnight, I had cleared all 20 bounty-eligible camps in the eastern forest. The paralysis held. The bodies would be found by guild patrols at dawn. Each camp took roughly the same amount of time. The gate's detection magic had mapped every coordinate before I left the tree line. The only variable was how many tried to fight back before they understood they could not. The strongest bandit in the forest registered an existence value around 362. I filed the question. A man that powerful hiding in a bandit camp was a mystery, but not tonight's mystery. Tonight's mystery was the girl waiting in a basement 3 blocks from the central casino, about to rob the Empire's most heavily guarded vault with a plan plan she had spent years building. I teleported to the alley behind the casino. Maris was mid-sentence when I materialized behind her. She had her crew arranged in a semicircle around a hand-drawn map of the casino's ventilation system, and she was pointing at the vault's secondary access shaft with a stick that had once been a broom handle. She stopped talking. The Phantom Stars reached for weapons. I noted the formation. Tight. Practiced. They had rehearsed being ambushed. "My father once turned down an assassination contract on your crew," I said. "The Cross family does not take contracts on targets they consider too interesting to waste." Maris turned slowly. She was younger than I expected, early 20s, eyes that had seen enough betrayal to make the rest of her face careful. She had the posture of someone who had kept her crew alive by refusing to look surprised. "Former Cross family member," I continued. "Current one-star adventurer. First job. I am here to make you an offer." She did not reach for a weapon. Good instincts. I gave her the terms. Contract with me, and the Phantom Stars become my personal extraction operation. The Empire's casino vaults, the noble family's offshore accounts, the trade guild's hidden ledgers. Everything she had been stealing one vault at a time, I would hand her on a schedule. In exchange, the money flows through me first, or refuse, and I hand the Phantom Stars membership list to the military police before sunrise. Maris activated her shadow movement skill without warning. She was fast, genuinely fast. She flanked left, dissolved into the lamplight's blind spot, and came at me from behind with a blade I had not seen her draw. I matched her speed without moving from my original posture. My silence skill locked onto her shadow at full resolution. She realized, in the half second before her blade reached me, that I had been reading her movement pattern for 30 seconds before she committed. She pulled the strike. Smart. "You are sharp," I said. "That is the problem. Sharp people do not kneel for arguments. They kneel for something they can feel." I activated divine transformation. Golden light filled the basement. It was warm. It was the same light I had used under the tree with Eve, the same hero mode frequency that speaks to the part of a person that has been carrying weight for too long and has forgotten what it feels like to set it down. Maris had been carrying her crew's hope for years. The heists, the narrow escapes, the promise that someday the stealing would mean something larger than survival. The light found every one of those years and told her, without words, that someone had finally seen them. She cried, quietly, the way people cry when they have been strong for so long that the strength itself has become the wound. She knelt. She took my hand. I turned off the divine transformation and noted, internally, that this ability made recruitment trivially easy, and I should probably feel worse about using it than I did. I did not feel worse. I felt efficient. That was its own kind of problem, but not tonight's problem. "Your plan is perfect," I told her, pulling her to her feet. "The vault access, the timing, the extraction route, all of it. Except for one thing." She wiped her face. Composure returning fast. "Good. Sovereign Sword," I said. "The elite guard team stationed in the casino break room. 5 members, all high-ranked, all bored and lazy, but still strong enough to end your crew if they engage. Your plan does not account for them, because your plan assumes you can be in and out before they respond. You cannot." I produced a summoning circle from my inventory. The geometry floated in the air between us, golden and precise. So I arranged a diversion. Melt Zeus hit the casino grounds like a natural disaster with a sense of humor. The summoned beast was built for mimicry and chaos, not direct combat, and I had given him exactly one instruction: rampage against the casino guards, spread enough terror to pull Sovereign Sword out of the break room, and do not kill anyone or destroy anything that cannot be rebuilt by morning. He followed instructions, barely. I watched from the rooftop across the street as the courtyard erupted. Guards poured out of the main entrance. Melt Zeus split into 3 copies of himself and ran them through the column arcade like a carnival act designed by something that hated architecture. The shouting was magnificent. Inside, the Phantom Stars were already moving. Maris had her crew through the secondary access shaft before the first guard drew a weapon. I split my attention. 1 thread on the casino, 1 thread on Catherine's position, 1 thread on the Imperial Council, where the nobles had been arguing for an hour about what to do about the God-class threat, and were about to get their answer hand-delivered. The report came to me in pieces. Guild gossip first, then Catherine's account, then Nick's commentary. I was not in the break room when it happened. I was on the roof managing 3 threads at once, but the story assembled itself clean enough that I can tell it the way it happened. Hugo was sitting at the center table when the presence hit. He was Sovereign Sword's captain, former frontline warrior, current professional coward, the kind of man who once threw a rank 20 strike without thinking, and now threw dice without thinking instead. He had traded the battlefield for a break room and told himself the trade was temporary until temporary became permanent. The space in front of him folded, black mist condensed, a throne materialized from nothing, and a skeleton in luxurious robes sat down on it, as if the break room had been built for his arrival. Mortis, God-class undead, from the deepest layer of the labyrinth. He introduced himself with the leisure of someone who had already decided the outcome. Hugo knew what he was looking at. His hands remembered even if his discipline did not. He grabbed his weapon, charged, and threw the rank 20 strike he had not practiced in years. Mortis brushed it aside like clearing dust from a sleeve. What followed was not a fight. It was a demonstration. Mortis was showing Hugo what he had become by showing him how little he could do. Hugo threw everything he had. Mortis answered with blows that came from directions Hugo's body was too slow to track. Hugo fell. He bled. He could not rise. Sovereign Sword's remaining members stood frozen against the walls. Their will to fight had left the room before Mortis had finished sitting down. Hugo lay on the floor and felt his life try to flash before his eyes. The flash was short. Everything since he had stopped striving fit into a single breath. Years of guard shifts, years of dice games, years of telling himself that comfort was the same as living. He thought with the kind of clarity that only comes when the body decides death is close. I do not want to die. The air shifted. Space magic cracked open behind Mortis. Catherine landed between Hugo and the skeleton in a burst of displaced air, the teleport scroll I had given her still dissolving around her fingers. She did not check on Hugo. She looked at Mortis. "Catherine Cross," she said, "absolute leader of the future 10-star team Cross Nova. You are in my way." Mortis attacked. Catherine dodged. It was not elegant. It was survival geometry at a speed that made Sovereign Sword's members physically unable to follow. Mortis swung again. Catherine rolled under it, came up on his flank, and threw a counter that would have killed anything below God class. Mortis evaded. He regarded her with something that might have been interest if the dead could feel interest. He acknowledged in that cold register the source material describes as almost admiring that he had not expected the Empire's bottom tier to contain a human at her level. He noted the subordinates she had already destroyed on her way in. Then he retreated. Space magic folded around him, and he was gone. Catherine stood in the center of the break room. Hugo lay on the floor behind her. The Sovereign Sword survivors were pressed against the walls, breathing like they had forgotten how. He thanked her by name. The word came out small, and it carried the weight of every year he had wasted. 3 blocks away, same minute, different chamber. I was not there either. I was still on the roof, but Guild intelligence, Catherine's relay, and the morning broadsheets told me enough to reconstruct it. The round table of nobles had been arguing for an hour. The God-class threat, the labyrinth breach, the casino theft. Whose fault? Whose budget? Whose adventurer team should be thrown at the problem so the rest of them could keep their hands clean? One faction wanted to send adventurers as exterminators. Another wanted a defensive manual. A third wanted to send Team Cross Nova since we had apparently already handled the casino attack. A fourth wanted to send Sovereign Sword to take responsibility for their failure. The meeting danced and nothing moved. Emperor Augustus sat at the head of the table and listened to his empire fail to agree on whether the sky was falling. The meeting had been going on long enough for the candles to burn halfway. Nobody was closer to a decision than they had been when they sat down. Augustus had listened to every faction present their version of courage and watched each one stop short of volunteering their own resources. The Empire's leadership, he knew, governed best when nothing was at stake. The moment the stakes arrived, they governed each other instead. He was about to speak when the air in the center of the chamber folded inward. Black mist, the same signature, the same geometry. Mortis materialized on the round table itself, throne and all, and looked down at the circle of the most powerful humans in the Empire with the expression of a man reviewing insects. The chamber fell silent. Mortis said something about the emperor not being able to understand a god. The nobles were silent. Their hands trembled. Their weapons stayed sheathed. I heard later, through the gossip chain that ran from the surviving nobles to the guild to Catherine to me, what Augustus did next. He stood up. Not quickly, not dramatically. The way a man stands when he has been sitting for too long and the thing he has been waiting for has finally arrived. Here is what I know about Emperor Augustus, Diana's father. He has hated his daughter since the day she was born. Not chosen to hate her. Felt it. An allergy, not a grudge. Something inside him that recoiled from his own child without his permission. He had spent Diana's entire life failing to love her and failing to understand why. Diana had warned him years ago. She had told him that something terrible would come out of the labyrinth. He had dismissed her the way he dismissed everything she said, because looking at her made his skin crawl, and he could not separate the message from the messenger. The message was standing on his round table. Augustus closed the gap in 2 steps. He threw a demon-crushing fist, rank 20, the kind of strike that shatters city walls. Mortis blocked it but was moved, physically moved, slid backward on the table's surface with his throne grinding against the stone. Augustus followed with a second strike, Holy Light variant, rank 21, a technique he had not used in 20 years, infused with a light the Empire had forgotten he carried. The strike landed in the center of Mortis's chest. 20 years of not using it. 20 years of sitting on a throne and letting the muscle memory go quiet. But the technique did not care about years. The technique cared about intent. And Augustus's intent in that moment was the purest thing in the chamber. He was defending a city. The city his daughter had told him would need defending. The daughter he could not look at without his body recoiling. The daughter who had been right every single time he had dismissed her. He did not think her name, but his fists knew whose warning had put him on his feet. Black particles leaked from the skeleton's form. The luxurious robe collapsed inward. Mortis crouched on the table, broken, and said something about despair being just the beginning. Then he dissolved. Space magic folded around the black particles and carried them out of the chamber like smoke through a cracked window. The nobles sat in silence. Augustus stood on his side of the table, breathing hard, his fists still closed. He did not say his daughter's name. He did not look at anyone in the room. He did not explain why he had just used it to defend the city his daughter had warned would die. He did not have to. I sat on the rooftop ledge and let Nick process the intelligence. Catherine's relay came through clean. Hugo was alive. Sovereign Sword survivors were being treated. Mortis had retreated from both locations. The casino vault was empty. 7.5 billion TEs redistributed. The clone I had sent into the casino disguised as Catherine had played its role. The public credit for driving off Mortis at the casino would land on Team Cross Nova. Catherine's reputation would jump exactly as far as the plan required. The Emperor's fight was a bonus I had not planned for, but had accounted for in the probability model. Diana's father, defending the city Diana had warned about, using techniques the Empire thought he no longer had. The karmic mathematics were elegant. I appreciated the symmetry quietly. 5 conditions down, I said to Nick. Adventurer rank, medal incoming, wealth secured, criminal judgment through the bandit processing, secret society through the Phantom Star's oath. Nick vibrated once on my head, his version of a nod. 2 left, the full formal oath, and the one the gate keeps reminding me I am failing to make progress on. Nick vibrated again, smugly. The gate, I said, can hold its breath. Sunset the next day. I sat on the villa couch with Nick on my head and Diana behind me in the same cushion posture she always claimed. Some things do not change. The position she sits in when she is pretending not to listen is one of them. Eve was performing the welcome tea protocol for Maris's crew with the precise formality of someone who had memorized every hospitality ritual in the villa's library and was going to perform all of them whether the guests wanted it or not. Maris sat on the floor with 4 senior Phantom Stars members, counting the night's take. They arranged it in stacks on the floor and then rearranged it in different stacks, as if the rearranging was part of the ritual. Catherine walked through the front door with the Emperor's medal in her hand, silver, embossed with the Imperial crest, formally awarded to Team Cross Nova in recognition of the previous night's defense of the Central Casino against a God-class threat. The Emperor had simultaneously promoted us to 7-star rank, skipping the normal sequence by 4 levels. The gate's voice registered in my head. Medal received. Rank acknowledged. Criminal judgment count incremented. 4 conditions confirmed. The meter sat at 5 of 7. I looked at the room. Maris on the floor with her crew and the stolen money. Catherine with the medal. Eve circulating with tea. Diana behind me, not looking at anyone, radiating the specific frequency of contempt she reserves for moments when she is secretly comfortable. Nick on my head, very still, doing his impression of an ornament. I will rule the underworld through phantom stars, I said, and the surface through Catherine. Both halves of the world's traffic flowing through one point. The facility unlocks will make the next phases of the gate's contracts survivable. The money funds the operation. The medal gives us access. The rank gives us clearance. I leaned back on the couch. I will become the god of the new world. The room went quiet. Diana, from behind me, in a voice that could have frozen the tea in Eve's hands, told me to apologize to the world's actual gods for comparing myself to them. She did not raise her voice. She did not turn her head. The words arrived like a knife thrown from a sitting position. Catherine looked at me. She had spent 12 hours processing the previous night. The question had narrowed. "What are you?" she asked, plainly. No angle to it, just the question. I turned my body halfway around on the couch, extended one finger, struck the pose the moment called for. A teenager's dramatic pose, absurd and deliberate. "Adrian Cross," I said. "Detective." The room broke. Eve's laugh was the loudest. Maris's crew grinned at each other. Catherine's expression did something complicated between disbelief and acceptance. Diana did not laugh, but her face did the thing her face does when the performance is failing, and she cannot quite decide whether to be angry about it. Nick shifted on my head. "The universe," he said, "is structurally allergic to letting you have nice things." I sat on the couch with the Emperor's medal on the table and the stolen fortune on the floor, and the 5 people I had gathered around me in the room. The gate's countdown to B sat at 5 days and 12 hours. The next mountain was already on the calendar, but the mountain could wait until morning. The morning after I declared myself god of a world that did not seem to care, I stood in the gate's entry chamber and let the console read my week. 5 conditions had cleared during the capital arc. 7-star adventurer rank, the Emperor's medal, the casino fortune, the criminal judgments, the world balance preservation. Each one triggered a cascade I could feel in the walls around me. Facility rooms unlocking one after another. The gate's flat bureaucratic voice listing them like a clerk reading receipts. Disciple creation and training room. Exogear super modification room. Library forbidden book area. Mask room. Special development room. The Phantom Star's oath had processed overnight. 6 of 7. The last condition was the one the gate noted with the dispassionate accuracy of a system that had been watching me for 200 million subjective years and still found my personal life disappointing. I ignored it. I had a week of deferred gate cycles banked. The doubling math ran its full course. 140 billion subjective years compressed into a single entry. 1 week on the outside. Half a second for Diana to blink. I walked past the console and into the disciple creation room. The room's manual was dense. Body composition, outer shell selection, core aura infusion, my own aura layered on top. Particle bonding with materials I could not translate into words that would mean anything to anyone who had not spent a geological age reading instruction manuals alone. I filled the 5 modification slots with facility-level gems and ground the room's effective level to 253. Then, I followed the steps. 10 subjective years to complete the first one. His name was Jamie. I picked it for the rhythm, not the meaning. He appeared fully human. He breathed. He blinked. He could not speak. The gate's rules were simple. Inside this space, a disciple could move, train, eat, exist, but could not show will or voice. A moving body with no words. I sat on the floor in front of him and wished for one thing, that he would grow strong enough to surpass me. Then I taught him how to make a fist. That took 1,000 years. I created Pamerano second. Same process, same silence. Satroas came third. By the time all 3 stood in front of me, watching me with faces that could not speak, I had been in the gate for something close to 50,000 years, and I was already talking to them like they could hear every word. They could not answer. I talked to them anyway, every day, I told them about Diana, about Eve, about the family that decided to erase me, about the world outside the gate that none of them would see until I carried them out. I told them I wanted to be the kind of model my own father was not. I told them I would never throw them away. 3 silent faces watched me train. I trained harder because they were watching. At 10 million years, the 3 of them had mastered Mortal Kombat. Jamie put 1 foot into divine combat first. The gate's voice ticked upward. Disciple cap raised to 3. I thanked them. I meant it. Teaching them had exposed inefficiencies in my own movement I had carried for 200 million years without noticing. They learned from me. I learned from watching them learn. At 50 million years, I left them to their drills and walked to the Exogear Super Modification Room. 10 million years of grinding modifications. My Exogear's output multiplied by an order of magnitude. I walked out dizzy and nauseous and did not stop. The mask room was next. The rules required 6 or more consecutive ether synergy chains for ideal base material. The per attempt success rate was the kind of number that made mathematicians laugh. I ground chain attempts for what felt like the entire lifespan of the universe. I completed the ideal base. I checked the external clock for the first time in over 1 billion subjective years. I had been hoping for something in the neighborhood of 130 billion. The number on the display read 2.8 billion, 137 billion years ahead of me. I laughed. I laughed harder. I laughed the way a person laughs when the architecture of their own suffering has just revealed a wing they did not know existed. The sound bounced off the stone walls and came back with nothing attached to it. Then the laughter stopped. It did not trail off. It stopped like a wire cut. I dropped to the floor. My chest caved. My hands pressed into the stone, and I could feel every year I had spent in this place sitting on my spine like a column of water that went up past where I could see. I wanted it to end. I wanted to stop. I said both out loud. No one answered. The gate does not answer when you ask it to let you die. It just watches. The disciples were on the training floor behind me, and they could not speak. And there was no one else in the entire structure of this place who could hear a single word I said. There are no heroes in this world. I understood that now. There was no one coming. There was no door that would open from the outside. There was only this room and the sound of my own breathing and the fact that I did not want to end. That was the answer. Not courage, not purpose, not some speech I gave myself about the people waiting outside. Just the flat biological fact that the thing inside my chest that kept beating did not want to stop. I got up because I did not want to stay down. I wiped my face. I went back to training. At 10 billion years, I found the library's forbidden book area. 30 volumes of a light novel called I Am Tired of Being Reincarnated in Another World. The protagonist's initials were SA. His suffering arc mirrored mine with the precision of a document written by someone who had watched me and gotten every detail almost right and every conclusion completely wrong. SA trained for 200 billion years. SA threw his life away to protect strangers. SA called himself a king. SA lost. I was not SA. I was smarter. I was better looking. I was the version of that story where the protagonist had Diana's face to hold on to, and Eve's loyalty to lean against, and 3 silent disciples who watched him train every day and never once let him pretend it did not matter. At 50 billion years, I vomited. The cumulative weight of training landed in one wave, and my body folded and my knees hit the stone, and for a moment, I could not see anything except the floor. Diana's face surfaced. Eve's face surfaced. Both held. Both always held. At 60 billion, I reread the meta-novel one last time and settled my ethics. Only family and subordinates. The world's strangers were not my problem. Helping strangers created dependency. SA tried to be a king and the throne broke his back. I would not be a king. I would be a hero who protected his own circle and let the rest of the world figure itself out. I believed that completely. The audience can hold on to that position. It will matter later. At 100 billion subjective years inside the gate, the voice came back. Milestone achieved. The Divine Combat Rift Room was open. I walked into it the way a man walks into a cathedral after crossing a desert that lasted longer than most civilizations. The room held the condensed wisdom of divine combat forms, packages of optimal combat responses accumulated by the gate itself across a timescale I could not meaningfully compare to anything. Each form required at least 100 million years to understand. I had 20 billion years ahead of me before the exit. I stayed. 20 billion years of absorbing forms. 20 billion years of watching my own combat instincts dissolve and rebuild at a resolution I had not known existed. The forms did not teach technique. They taught the geometry underneath technique, the architecture of where a body should be before the opponent's body knew where it was going. I emerged at 120 billion years total. I asked the CPU room to set Eve at maximum tier, ultimate perfect body, 19 trillion existence value, full martial repertoire, no restrictions. The CPU complied. I fought her. She moved the way the real Eve had moved, except faster, heavier, and without the emotional noise that had made the original fight survivable. The CPU did not hesitate. The CPU did not love me. I defeated her without taking a hit. My brain's precision in selecting possibility paths through the fight had reached a level I could not have described to myself 100 billion years earlier. I saw her movement before it happened. I countered the move that had not yet been made. The fight ended the way a sentence ends when the speaker already knows the last word. The gate's voice cut in. 140 billion years compressed into 1 week of real time, exiting in 3 subjective hours. B arrives in approximately 6 external hours. I used the 3 hours to drill divine combat forms with the disciples one last time. Jamie, Pomerano, and Satrawas had mastered the basics of divine combat themselves. 120 billion years of watching me had turned them into something the gate's original parameters had not anticipated. They watched me run the last sequence with the faces of 3 children who had been with their father for longer than most worlds had existed. I thanked them out loud, in the same voice I had used to thank Eve under the tree. Then the gate ejected me. Diana was sipping tea 2 feet from me. Half a second had passed by the external clock. She did not look up. She did not know I had been gone. From her side of time, I had blinked. From mine, I had lived another 120 billion years and come back with the ability to see combat the way light sees glass. I sat down on the couch. The cushion was warm. The tea smelled like something a person in a normal life would drink on a normal morning. The girl 2 feet from me was still the most beautiful thing in any room I had ever been in, across any number of years I had ever lived. 6 hours until the next mountain. I could feel it on the calendar like a pressure change before a storm. I said nothing. I sat with her. The morning held. I had been at peace for exactly 3 seconds. That was the count. 3 seconds of standing in the afterglow of something I had spent 20 billion years learning to feel. My mind clear, my body tuned, the disciples training in their corner of the chamber like quiet furniture I happen to love. 3 seconds of thinking the word safe and meaning it. The explosion took the wall, not a crack, not a rumble. The entire eastern face of the chamber blew inward like something on the other side had been running at it for a very long time and had just now arrived. Stone dust filled the air. The rune lights flickered. The gate's bureaucratic voice, the one that announced every facility and every condition and every tedious rule I had memorized across 120 billion years, said nothing. The explosion was not on the schedule. Jamie, Pomerano, and Satrawas stepped behind me without being told. I did not look back at them. I looked at the hole in the wall and at the door that was now standing inside it. I knew that door. I had seen it twice before. The Hollow Labyrinth's deep door, the one that sat at the bottom of the dungeon where Nick had tried to kill me and where Eve had tried to end the world. That door did not belong here. The gate's authentication system was supposed to make this space impossible to penetrate from the outside. It opened. A man walked out. He had a bug's head, compound eyes, mandibles, antennae folded flat against a skull that was not a skull. The rest of him was a tailored black suit, pressed and buttoned, like he had dressed for a job interview at the end of the world. He stopped 3 paces from the broken wall, adjusted his cuffs, and introduced himself. The ultimate complete great bug nightmare. He was here to kill me. I asked him how he got in. He told me, in a voice so polite, it could have been reading a dinner menu, that he did not respect rules. He wanted to win seriously, so he had hacked his way through a structural exploit he called B creation, borrowing permissions the gate was never designed to grant. The gate's full recovery cheat would have made me invincible if we fought outside, so he had come to where the cheat lived and broken the door down. I looked at the rubble. I looked at the dust still settling on the floor. I looked at the bug-headed man in the suit standing in the middle of my sanctuary like he owned the lease. "You are paying for the carpet," I said. He did not laugh. He did not react at all. He simply continued, with the patience of someone who had already calculated every variable and found none of them interesting. He explained his plan. 300 lights appeared in the air behind him, small, pale, hovering like lanterns at a funeral no one had been invited to. Souls, stolen from the world outside by miniature subordinates he had sent during the week between the B threat announcement and now. 300 innocent lives, ripped out of their bodies and brought here as leverage. One of the lights drifted forward. The bug pumped magic into it, and for a moment it flickered into the shape of a person. A young woman, translucent, trembling, eyes wide with a terror that had no floor underneath it. She was there for less than 5 seconds before the light collapsed back to its lantern form. He tossed me a stack of papers, 300 profiles, printed like resumes, one per soul. Names, histories, occupations, next of kin. He proposed a deal. I read all 300. In exchange, he would tell me the hidden gate facility conditions I had not figured out on my own. I told him the deal was stupid. I also told him I had nothing better to do for the next 15 minutes. I read. The profiles were ordinary. Farmers, merchants, bakers, seamstresses, scholars who had never held a weapon. People who had been living their lives until something the size of a grain of sand had crawled through their window and stolen the only thing they could not replace. The bug, while I read, laid out the rest. During our fight, he would periodically aim dimensional cannon attacks at the 300 souls. If I dodged to save myself, the souls died. If I shielded the souls, my stamina bled. The math was simple. The bug acknowledged with academic detachment that simple traps were the only kind that worked on me, because my exceptional spirit had found a way through every clever trick anyone had ever designed. Direct, large, unavoidable. That was the path. I finished the last profile. I set the stack on the floor. "Boring plan," I said. He delivered the promised information about the remaining facility conditions. Both of us honored the contract. Both of us knew what came next. He came at me head on, full speed, aura pouring off his suit like black steam. I moved one foot, a quarter step to the left. His ankle caught the edge of my boot, and he went face first into the stone floor with a sound like a suitcase dropped from a balcony. He lay there for a full second. I yawned. "I considered using grim arts," I said, "but you were too slow to justify the warm-up." He got up. He was not embarrassed. He was recalibrating. He brought his hands together and carved a geometry pattern in the air, and through that pattern, something worse than him stepped into the chamber. The deputy was more insect than man. Where the bug wore a suit over his wrongness, the deputy did not bother with the disguise. Chitin plating, compound eyes twice the size of the bug's, mandibles that clicked when he moved. He landed on the chamber floor and immediately began carving his own geometry around the room's perimeter. Circles inside circles, each one hatching. The first wave came in at the size of trucks, scorpion-shaped, thin-winged, clicking and screeching in a frequency that sat behind the ears and refused to leave. 10,000 of them by the time the deputy stopped carving. The bug invited me to handle all 10,000 at once. I told him I had trained 100 billion years for this. The work was tedious, but the resume was solid. I activated Godspeed Flash Fist and started punching. 100 dead in the first few minutes. Their bodies burst into geometry fragments and dissolved. I settled into a rhythm. Punch, pivot, punch. The divine combat forms read the swarm's movement patterns before the swarm knew it was moving. I was faster. I was stronger. I was bored. This part was not the problem. The bug snapped his fingers after the first hour. He threatened a dimensional cannon on the 300 souls if I did not stop for 10 seconds. I did not stop. I told him I did not care if people I had never met disappeared. I had said as much in the training chamber when I was alone, and I meant it now. Strangers were not my responsibility. Family was. Subordinates were. Everyone else was someone else's problem. The bug gave up the bluff. He turned to something crueler. He pumped magic into one of the 300 lights. Sasha's soul flickered back into human form. She stood in the air behind me, trembling, tears running down a face that was barely holding its shape. She was young. She was terrified. She opened her mouth and said the only words she had the strength to say. "Help me, please." I did not turn around. "You are older than me," I said. "Help me instead." She did not answer. The magic ran out. She collapsed back into light. The bug registered that sentimental manipulation had failed. He nodded to the deputy. The deputy folded himself into a shape that was not a body anymore. A long, angular machine gun configuration. Barrels where limbs used to be. The bug lifted him, aimed, and chanted. Conference call. Over 500 black spheres materialized in the air around me, each one the size of a ball bearing, each one humming. After a half-second lag, they fired. Black lasers, thin and precise, fanning out from every direction. Some of the lasers pointed at me. Some pointed past me, at the 300 lights hovering behind my back. I had half a second to choose. I could dodge the ones aimed at me. If I dodged, the ones aimed past me hit the souls. The geometry was clean. The bug had designed it that way. I thought of Diana throwing herself in front of the blast meant for me. I thought of the way her body had dissolved before I could reach her. I thought of the word I had used to describe what she did. Stupid. I stood still. Every laser hit me. The ones aimed at my chest. The ones aimed at my head. The ones aimed past me that now hit my back because I was standing in the way. My health collapsed to a sliver. I dropped to one knee. The stone cracked under the impact. The bug asked why I protected the souls I claimed not to care about. "Mind your own business," I said. He told me, in that same dinner menu voice, that my words and my actions disagreed, and that the disagreement would be the most useful thing he had found in me all day. The fight did not end. The fight did not have a shape that could end. I cleared the original 10,000 across 100 hours. 100 hours of Godspeed Flash Fist and Divine Combat trajectory, reading and punching through waves of truck-sized scorpions while periodically throwing my body between conference call lasers and the 300 lights behind me. Every time I shielded the souls, my stamina bar dropped. Every time the bug noticed the drop, he aimed the next volley a little more precisely at the gap between me and the lights, forcing me to stretch wider. I switched from Omega Bastion to my own body. Omega Bastion canceled the attacks outright, but the cost performance was terrible for sustained defense. My body absorbed the hits at a fraction of the mana cost, and the gate's residual recovery trickled health back between volleys. The trade was pain for efficiency. I had made that trade before. By hour 98, I had ground the swarm down to the bug and the deputy, and a handful of stragglers dissolving into geometry dust. I stood in the cleared chamber, breathing hard, and told the bug that the despair he had brought was weaker than the despair Eve had brought. He would need to be 5 times stronger to interest me. The deputy snapped his fingers. A geometry pattern 5 times the size of his first one materialized across the ceiling. 99,998 new bugs crawled out of it in 30 seconds. They filled the chamber from wall to wall. The sound of their wings was the sound of a thunderstorm made of clicking. The bug, in the same polite register he had used to introduce himself, explained that infinite resurrection was not unique to Eve. The Aria Geas that had been engraved into Eve's destiny was the same Geas engraved into his entire clan. It could not be lifted by killing the source. It could not be lifted by killing every member at once. The trope did not apply. They would come back. They would always come back. Then he delivered the rest. He told me that my defeat meant the end. The 300 souls would perish. Eve would die. Diana would die. The world would be consumed. He admitted, with the detachment of a man reading footnotes, that they had dangled hope in front of me from the beginning, specifically to make this moment heavier. I listened. Something inside me went flat, not angry, not broken. Flat the way a wire goes flat when you stretch it past the point where it can vibrate. The same emptiness I had felt when Diana dissolved in front of me, the same void I had felt at 2.8 billion years when I had screamed for help and no one answered. Flat. I clenched my fists. The smallest possible smile crossed my face. "I'm creeped out," I said. "I almost want to end this myself." I launched a Dragon Flash crushing fist at the bug's head. The head exploded. Chitin and compound eye fragments scattered across the floor. The body kept standing. The body adjusted its cuffs. I destroyed the deputy's head with the same technique. The deputy kept standing too. The bug's head reformed. He told me, with the politeness of a man who has just been mildly inconvenienced, that destroying heads did not stop them. I looked at the regenerated face. I looked at the 99,000 bugs filling the chamber. I looked at the 300 lights behind me. The bug confirmed his existence value, 500 trillion, the number the B threat announcement had promised. I told him the number was meaningless. He was fragile. He was light. He lacked substance. I had punched through 10,000 of his kind in 100 hours, and the only thing that had changed was my boredom level. To me, I said, eternal is no different from a second. The bug calculated the trade. I watched him calculate it. He was asking himself whether a man who had already survived 120 billion years of solitude could be outlasted by a swarm that came back every time it died. The answer was supposed to be yes. The answer was supposed to be that infinite resurrection beats finite endurance every single time. The answer was wrong, and the bug knew it was wrong. He just could not figure out why yet. The fight continued. Conference calls aimed at the souls. My body in the way. Mana draining. Stamina settling into a slow downward curve that would eventually hit a floor I could not see. By hour 120, I was tired in a way I had not been before. Not the deep exhaustion of the training years. Not the catastrophic fracture of losing Diana. A new kind. The kind where you keep standing because the alternative is letting someone behind you disappear, and you have decided, without saying it out loud, without admitting it to the bug-headed man in the suit, or to yourself, that you will not let that happen. The war had no terminal condition. The bug could not kill me fast enough. I could not kill the bug permanently. The 300 souls hung in the air behind me like lanterns at a vigil that had no scheduled end. I kept standing. The bug kept watching. The deputy kept carving geometry. The swarm kept hatching. Somewhere past hour 120, I stopped counting. The conference call hit me in the back. 500 black laser spheres converging on the gap between my shoulders, and the 300 lights behind me. The bug had learned my geometry. He had spent 120 plus hours mapping which angles I could cover and which ones I could not. And this volley threaded every blind spot he had cataloged. The lasers that were aimed at the souls hit me first because I put myself where the souls were. The lasers that were aimed at me hit me second because there was nowhere else to go. My health bar did not drop. It collapsed. The number went from whatever fraction I had been holding to a sliver so thin it did not register as a color anymore. My knees bent. My vision whited out. I bit down so hard I felt something crack in my jaw, and I used the pain to stay conscious the way a man uses a handrail on a cliff. I dropped to a knee, one knee. The chamber floor was warm under my palm. The bug asked me, in that dinner menu voice, what meaning my defense carried. Why a being who had explicitly stated he did not care about strangers was letting himself be destroyed to shield them. What the productivity was, what the rationality was, what the return on investment of dying for 300 people he had never met could possibly look like to a man who had lived 120 billion years. I stayed on one knee. The 300 lights hovered behind me, silent, waiting to find out if the boy between them and the lasers had an answer. I did not have a good one. There was no meaning. There was no rationality. There was no productivity. I had stated my ethic in the library a long time ago, and the ethic said only family and subordinates, and the 300 souls behind me were neither. The bug's diagnosis was correct. My words and my actions disagreed, and the disagreement had been visible from the start. I got off my knee, slowly. My stamina bar was somewhere below the floor. My mana was a joke I was telling myself to stay upright. There is no meaning, I said. There is no logic. There is no return. I straightened my back. I am just destined to become the strongest hero, and the strongest hero protects whoever is standing behind him. That is the entire argument. The bug called me disgusting. He asked what I really was. I did not think about the answer. The rational version of me, the one who had promised to avoid trouble and keep the circle small and only protect what was mine, had been sitting in the back of my head for 15 phases waiting for me to listen. The berserk version stepped forward instead. I knew what I was. I was the same creature as the mysterious essay from the books I had read in the library, driven by ego, fueled by pride so absurd it looped back around to sincerity, justified by the smallest possible smile. S.A. had done it for his own reasons, and I was doing it for mine, and the reasons were the same, because something in us refused to be smaller than the moment demanded. I stopped apologizing for it. I stopped pretending the circle was small. I stopped telling myself the ethic held. My eyes changed. I felt it happen. The color shifted in a way I could not name, and the bug saw it, and the 300 lights behind me saw it, and the gate watching from its invisible perch saw it. I told the bug what I was. I am the tyrant king of the deep divine realm, I said. The divine cherry blossom that tunes fate. The scattering flash who refuses to be ranked. 3 short sentences. No drama in the delivery. The drama was in the chamber understanding what the sentences meant, because the chamber had been watching a boy pretend to be modest for 120 billion years, and the boy had just stopped pretending. The bug took a step back, 1 step. The first involuntary movement I had seen from him since the fight began. I smiled. The same smile from under the tree. The hero who shows up at the worst possible moment and says it is okay. The berserk version of me accelerated forward. 5 subjective years. The first year was the hardest to describe because the first year was the one where my body learned how to stop thinking. I had spent 120 billion years training my mind to control my body. Inside the Tyrant King mode, I let the body take over. Fist, step, pivot, fist. 100 bugs per minute, 1,000 per hour. The math was industrial. The result was industrial. The bugs died, reformed, died again. I punched through them the way a machine stamps parts on an assembly line, and the rhythm of the stamping became the rhythm of my heartbeat, and the heartbeat became the only clock in the chamber. By month 3, I had passed 50,000 kills. The bug complained. He told me to give up. I laughed, and the laugh sounded wrong even to me, like the sound a boiler makes when the pressure gauge has been past red for a while. By year 2, I had passed 200,000. My movements had optimized. I no longer chose which technique to use. My body read the trajectory before the bug finished spawning and selected the strike that would end it with the least energy expenditure. Dragon Flash for the clusters. Godspeed Flash Fist for the singles. My own fist for the ones close enough to touch. The chapter of my life where I had to think about fighting was over. I was a function now. Input, bug, output, dead bug, repeat. The bug attacked the 300 souls periodically. I stood between them. The conference call still hit me, and the health bar still dropped, and the gate's residual recovery still trickled it back between volleys. The trade had not changed. Pain for efficiency. I had been making that trade for 5 years. By year 5, I had passed 500,000, 500,000 bugs, killed and reformed and killed again. The deputy's geometry patterns were thinner now. He was summoning fewer per cycle. The bug's resurrections were taking longer. Not much longer. A few seconds more than before. But I had spent 120 billion years learning to read the difference between 3 seconds and 5 seconds. And the difference was everything. The bug coughed. The same dark fluid that had leaked from Mortis in the Imperial Council chamber leaked from the bug's mandibles. He wiped it with the back of his suited hand and kept standing. I forbade him to stop. I told him his potential had not opened yet. I told him to keep fighting, keep resurrecting, keep sending bugs, because the Tyrant King of the deep divine realm did not accept surrenders from enemies who had not exceeded their own limits. He coughed again. The deputy summoned another wave, smaller than the last. Somewhere in year 5, between kill 490-something thousand and kill 500,000, I asked myself when my life would be complete, not when it would end, when it would be complete. The question had no answer. The chamber had no answer. The gate watching from its perch had no answer. The 500,000th bug dissolved under my fist, and the question hung in the dust like the echo of a bell no one had rung. The war continued, but the curve had shifted. The bug was breaking, and I was still standing, and the difference between 3 seconds and 5 seconds was growing. Year 5 and something. I hit the bug with a dragon flash crushing fist. His face shattered like thin ice on a winter puddle. The body stayed upright. The body adjusted its cuffs. The face reformed, slower. The compound eyes that reassembled themselves were duller than the ones I had been looking at for 5 years. The mandibles clicked into place with a delay that said the mechanism behind them was wearing out. I hit him again. The face broke again, reformed again, slower again. "Keep going," I said. "You have not exceeded your limit yet." The bug, on the floor now, regenerating for the 40-somethingth time this week, told me he could not do it. The coldly polite register from 5 years ago had thinned into something that sounded like a man reading his own last words off a card he had written too long ago. He told me to stop. He told me there was no point. He told me the infinite resurrection was a lie. I did not move. He told me the Aria Gaius was real, but bounded. It had hard limits he himself had not known the exact number of when he started. He had told me it was infinite because the story of infinity was more effective than the story of a large but finite number. He had been bluffing since the moment he revealed the mechanic. The bluff was designed to make me despair, because despair was the only weapon that had ever worked against a man who had survived 120 billion years of solitude. The bluff had failed. Not because I had seen through it, I had not. I had believed the infinity. I had simply decided that infinity was not a reason to stop, because to me, eternal was no different from a second. The bluff failed because the boy it was aimed at did not process time the way the bluff assumed he would. I looked at the bug on the floor. The compound eyes were dim. The suit was ruined. The antennae lay flat against his skull like flags that had given up. "At the very least," I said, "keep working until you break through whatever wall you think you have hit." The bug's eyes closed, not from the punch, from something worse. 5 years of watching a teenager refuse to stop had done what the Aria Gaius could not protect against. The Gaius was bound to the body's resurrection. It had nothing to say about the will, and the bug's will, the cold, polite calculation that had walked through the gates wall and held 300 souls hostage and diagnosed my ethic as deflection, shattered. Not the face, not the body, the spirit behind them. The spirit of the creature who had come here to break me broke instead, and the breaking was quiet, and the breaking was final. The bug disintegrated, not violently, not with an explosion or a scream. He came apart the way morning frost comes apart when the sun finds it. The body lost coherence. The suit dissolved. The compound eyes went dark and scattered into particles that drifted upward like ash from a fire no one had lit. The deputy disintegrated in the same instant. Every remaining bug in the chamber dissolved alongside them because they had never been coherent without the bug's will holding their geometry together. 10,000 fragments became dust. The dust became nothing. The nothing settled on the floor. The chamber went silent. 5 years of grinding war ended inside 2 breaths. I stood in the middle of the room with the 300 soul lights behind me and the disciples and Nick on my head, and the silence pressing against my ears like water. I held the silence. I did not fill it. 5 years was a long time to spend with the sound of clicking and dying, and the absence of that sound deserved a moment to exist on its own. The gate's voice cut through. Not the bureaucratic register, something else. Something warmer than I had heard from the gate in 120 billion years of daily visits. The gate congratulated me. It said the words out loud in the chamber, where the dust of the bug was still settling. It told me I had defeated the ultimate complete great bug nightmare through spirit alone, and that the result exceeded its projections. Then it offered to handle the 300 souls. I asked what handle meant. The gate, in its bureaucratic register partially reasserted, admitted that handle could mean erase. It was, technically, a suggestion. No, I said. The gate, with what I could only describe as amusement, offered an alternative. It would revive the 300 souls and return them to their original world, restoring them to their bodies at the exact moment they had been taken. The revival was recognition for what I had done, a thank you from the system. I told the gate the revival was not a proper reward. I wanted the facility liberated instead. The next locked room in the gate's architecture, the one that would give me access to whatever training the gate had been withholding. That was the trade I wanted. The gate counteroffered. If I chose the facility, the 300 souls would be erased. It could not do both. The contract required a choice. I grumbled. The grumble was loud enough for the entire chamber to hear, and it was directed at no one in particular, and it was the most honest sound I had made in 5 years. Fine, I said. Revive them. The gate did not gloat. The gate simply acted. The 300 lights behind me brightened. Each one flared once, like a candle catching a sudden breath of wind, and then began to rise. They lifted off the chamber floor and drifted upward through the ceiling, through the stone, through whatever barrier separated the gate's interior from the world outside. Each light was a person returning to their body. Each flare was a life restored. Sasha was the last to go. She did not rise with the others. She stayed, and for a moment the pale light around her solidified into the shape I had seen once before. The young woman with the light brown hair and the wide eyes who had asked me for help in this same chamber 5 years ago. "Thank you," she said. The words were small and sincere and carried no deflection and no irony and no clever subtext. Just a person who had been stolen from her life and kept in the dark for 5 years, thanking the boy who had refused to let her disappear. I told her she should have been berating me instead. She had missed 5 years because I could not finish the fight faster. The least she could do was be angry about it. Sasha smiled. The smile was the kind that lands on you before you realize it has weight. She vanished. The last light rose through the ceiling and was gone. The chamber held 300 fewer souls than it had held 5 years ago, and each one of them was home. The gate's voice returned, warmer now. The warmth of a system that had been watching a soul rebuild itself across 100 million and another 100 million and 10 billion and 140 billion subjective years, and had decided today to say something about it. It told me what I had done was the work of a hero. I waited for the qualification. The gate always had a qualification, a footnote, a condition, a new facility with a new cost and a new rule that turned the reward into a transaction. The gate confirmed that I was ranked number 1. I blinked, number 1. In 120 billion years of daily visits, the gate had never ranked me at anything. Level 1 forever. That was the system's verdict. The external world's chart said I was the weakest being alive, and the chart had never changed, and I had stopped expecting it to. Number 1 in what ranking? I asked. The gate paused. I had never heard the gate pause before. Then it answered. The pitiful person ranking. The chamber was empty except for me and the disciples, and Nick on my head, and the laughter that came out of me echoed off every wall. The pitiful person ranking. The system that had watched me train for 120 billion years, survive Eve, survive the bug, save 300 strangers, and break the spirit of a 500 trillion existence value enemy, had ranked me number 1 on a list whose name sounded like a category on a game show nobody would watch. I laughed. I laughed the way I had not laughed since before the bug walked through the wall. The kind of laugh that is not funny and is not sad and is just the sound a person makes when the universe gives them exactly the recognition they deserve in exactly the form they should have expected. The gate's voice went warm for one more sentence. It told me, underneath the joke, that the recognition was real. Number 1, not in the world's system, in the gate's own internal register, the chart that measured what a soul actually was, not what the external labels said. The boy who had been called level 1 since the day his family threw him away was, according to the only system that had watched every second of his life, the strongest. Level 1 forever. Number 1 forever. Both true. Both the same person. Then the gate dropped the warmth and delivered the rest. The next enemy would be incomparably worse than Eve and the bug. Everything about the next threat was unknown. The gate could not tell me its name, its origin, its power, or its method. It could only confirm that it was coming and that my preparation might not be enough. I complained. I told the gate that Eve and the bug had already been hellish. Eve had 1 trillion existence value. The bug had 500 trillion, an infinite resurrection that turned out to be a lie. What could possibly be worse than that? The gate confirmed that I remained number 1 in the pitiful person ranking. I agreed with the assessment. The agreement landed in my chest like a stone I had been carrying for 120 billion years, finally settling into the place where it was supposed to sit. The joke was real. The recognition was real. The next mountain was real. All three existed in the same breath, and I held that breath for a moment, and then I let it go. The deep door of the hollow labyrinth resealed. The gate's wall knitted itself shut. The breach was repaired. The chamber looked the way it had looked before the bug walked through it, except for the scorch marks on the floor and the faint smell of chitin dust that would probably never come out of the stone. I exited the gate. Half a second. That was the external clock. 5 years inside. Half a second outside. I walked through the gate's exit and into the villa's living room, and the sun was in the same position it had been when I left. The tea Eve had been brewing was still hot. The newspaper Catherine was reading had not turned a page. Diana was on the sofa cushion behind me, legs tucked beneath her, chin slightly elevated, green eyes watching me the way she watched everything, like the universe was a performance she had already reviewed and found lacking. "You smell like dead bugs," she said. The insult landed with the precision of someone who had spent the entire half-second I was gone composing the optimal welcome home barb. Eve set a cup of tea on the table beside the sofa. She did not bow. She did not kneel. She did not call me master or gem or any of the titles she had used in the early days. She simply set the tea down, met my eyes, and said welcome back with the kind of warmth that does not need ceremony to land. Catherine turned the newspaper page. "Your boots," she said, without looking up. "They are covered in something that is ruining my carpet." Maris walked in from the back hallway, clocking in from the late shift. She confirmed the night's underground operations had gone smoothly. No incidents, no casualties. The Phantom Stars were holding the Eastern District without complaint. The villa was full of people who had no business being in the same building, living lives that had no business intersecting, held together by a boy they had each decided, independently and for different reasons, to stay near. The ritual chamber where my father had erased my name felt like 120 billion years ago. It was, and it was also this morning. Nick had been quiet for the entire walk from the gate to the sofa. The silence meant he was composing something. "You know," Nick said, "for a guy who just spent 5 years punching bugs in a hole, you look exactly the same as when you left." A pause. The slime equivalent of a dry smile. "That is probably the saddest compliment anyone has ever given you." I sat down on the sofa. Diana did not move to make room. Eve poured a second cup. Catherine continued reading. Maris leaned against the doorframe and closed her eyes for a count of 3. The next mountain was out there, unknown, incomparable, coming. But right now, the tea was hot, and the sofa was warm, and the people I had spent 120 billion years learning to keep were all in the same room, and Nick was on my head, and the pitiful person ranking said I was number 1, and that was going to be enough for as long as it lasted.